the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
He's gone golfing. Donald Trump has playing a round of golf as the markets are tanking around the world because of his tariffs. He says it's a great thing, it's going to be booming, everything is going to be marvellous. We're talking on Talk Drive today about that, what effect it's going to have on you, and the fact that some American politicians, including Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is saying if there are retaliatory tariffs, don't attack us. Talk Drive is going to be about that. It's also going to be about 5 years of Keir Starmer. What sort of a job do you think he has done as leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister? We've got some polling to say that lots of people think not a particularly good one. Also, there are 500,000 young people out of work. Why? Why is that? Are you a young person listening or watching at home? Are you out of work? Maybe you're a parent of one of these people and you're thinking, oh, they've tried everything and they can't get into work. Or alternatively, that there are a lot of lazy young people out there. Maybe that's the case as well. Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq, the Mayor of London, has been accused of parroting Hamas propaganda in his Eid message. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk to Sir A.P. McCoy as well about the Grand National. Lots of people having a flutter over the weekend, and why NHS dentists may not be there. None of them, according to one campaign group, if urgent action isn't taken now. We'll talk about the weather as well and find out why one weather forecaster owns 12 vacuum cleaners. Yes, really. Stay with us here on Talk. There's loads to discuss. I want to discuss it with you. Make sure you get your call in between now and 7. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can ring me for a discussion on the air. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can send me a WhatsApp voice message. Keep them to less than a minute, please. We'll play out as many of those as we can. Whatever's on the tip of your tongue, whatever you want to say today, let me know. It's my show, but it's your show too, here on Talk Drive. Well, James Healy is the deputy political editor of The Spectator. Let's get straight into this, both in terms of what's happening in America, how it's affecting us here in the United Kingdom, and, of course, Keir Starmer as well. 5 years as Labour leader today. James, you're very welcome to the programme. Just before we chat to you, I just want to reflect on what Donald Trump has been saying. He's been remaining optimistic despite the unsettled global markets.
We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many, many years. For many years, we've been at the wrong side of the ball, and I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The thing that people have to talk about, we're up almost to $7 trillion of investment coming into our country. And you'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
That is the US President Donald Trump. The Prime Minister here in the UK, Keir Starmer, celebrating 5 years as leader of the Labour Party. He has said on the UK's response to the tariffs that actually things are perhaps better than they could be.
The choice before us was whether to jump into retaliatory action with both feet at the get-go, or to continue with our calm approach of trying to negotiate a deal that will mitigate the tariffs. I think the second course is the right course.
Well, watching that on now to respond is James Healy, the deputy political editor of The Spectator. James, it was really interesting hearing what Donald Trump was saying there, because he immediately talked about doing a deal. He immediately talked about these countries that have been hit with these tariffs doing a deal. And I think, and I wonder what you think about this, that we've been in a situation where Canada and Mexico had tariffs imposed and then taken away almost as quickly as they were imposed. And I wonder whether this is a strategy by Trump to have a big, huge show of this, which is obviously affecting the markets hugely, 2.2 trillion wiped off them. But nonetheless, he can row back by saying that he has goaded people into that rowing back and doing a deal.
I think that's very much the most plausible outcome here, Peter, for 2 reasons. Number one of which, as you say, he loves the theatre. He loves the show of it. He was there earlier this week unveiling this whole series of tariffs, like it was sort of ordering off the specials menu in a restaurant. You know, they're the great showman at the podium talking, you see it on the screen there, you know, all these different ones, the different rates at which they're applying. So he very much likes a big flourish. But the second point, of course, is that, you know, this is causing huge uncertainty, huge, you know, the Dow Jones has lost 1,500 points. The European stock market's at its worst point for 5 years since COVID started in March 2020. And so this looks unsustainable. So really, I do think perhaps there will be something about a deal, and therefore he can then do a great flourish and say, aha, now I've sorted this issue out and go back to it. But obviously, in the interim, huge damage is being done. And I understand in Whitehall and Westminster, that's what ministers will be spending the next few days and weekend trying to resolve.
It's interesting from Keir Starmer because he is trying to play things down to say perhaps a deal can be done. He accused Kevin Badenoch at Prime Minister's Questions this week of putting a lot of hot air into this and not having done a deal when she was Trade Secretary previously. There are lots of indications a deal could, in theory, be done. So could, in the UK's case specifically, is there a hope in Westminster that these tariffs will disappear quickly?
There's hope of some kind of bare bones deal that they hope will be kind of concluded over the next coming weeks or so. I think it's been reported and I understand that, you know, it's very close to finalisation. The key thing, of course, is the great, I think, benefit and weakness for the UK's position in terms of Trump's mind is that we're quite low down. You know, we're not one of those countries that he feels has really wronged us. That's why Canada and Mexico were first. We're not the kind of great evil that he thinks the European Union is. You know, he's always rallied against the European Union for the past 20 years of his career. But that also does mean that I don't think we're a priority necessarily over the next couple of days or so in terms of getting some kind of opt-out from those tariffs and getting a deal done immediately. So I think there will be an expectation of some kind of deal. We'll wait to see the specifics of that. But the hope is that in the interim, there won't be too much damage done and that actually some kind of trading relationship can be preserved over the next weeks and months or so.
And what about faith in Starmer himself and Jonathan Reynolds, the Trade Secretary? Is there faith in them that they can get something done? Starmer saying he's very happy playing this down, play it cool, everything will be fine, just play the slightly longer game, don't panic. I mean, that's often how Keir Starmer approaches political problems, but is there the support for him, do you think, to actually have that level of patience?
I think that in terms of Keir Starmer's position, reasonably in government, he is being well supported. But I would also make the point that, you know, he's getting this advice from business. And there's business today cited in the Times, etc., suggesting that actually, you know, businesses do not want a trade war. They're saying do not respond to tariffs, do not retaliate, because, you know, the US economy is bigger than Germany, the UK and Indian economies combined. And so actually it's best to kind of hold our nerve, wait to see this out and don't result in a tit for tat, because we all know the last time that was happened was almost 100 years ago, Smoot-Hawley and the Great Depression. So business is saying the same thing as the government, which is keep calm, let's try to do some backroom deal, and hopefully Trump's attention then turns elsewhere and these tariffs will be lifted. Just
want to ask you briefly about China. And I'm sure you've been talking to your colleague at The Spectator there, Cindy Yu, who obviously represents all 1.2 billion Chinese people. I just wonder what has been the reaction in Westminster to the Chinese element of this, the 34% levy on US goods in retaliation to Trump's tariffs?
Well, this was very much an inevitability. You know, China had, with its usual bombastic rhetoric, threatened appropriate recourse, and now they've delivered today. And really, it's confirmation what we kind of suspected, that after Trump put 54% tariffs on China, China's now putting 34% tariffs in response. Those are going to kick in from next Thursday. There's also a series of other measures as well. For instance, blocking some of the rare earth materials that are necessary to build semiconductors, and we go into a lot of electronic equipment. So that's happened as well. And really, I think it's all eyes on Trump. And are we going to see any kind of blowback politically from the stock market meltdown that we're seeing? Lots of Americans in the first term really benefited from that Trump economy. Trump himself always used to talk up the stock market. And so now he's talking about the stock market's going to boom. But right now it looks much more like a bust.
James, I just want to remind ourselves of some of the highlights of Keir Starmer's last 5 years. He has been leader of the Labour Party since then, taking over from Jeremy Corbyn. Of course, let's have a look at some of the things he's been up to.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner.
The relationship between our two nations has been one of collaboration. I'm anti-Trump, cooperation. But don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected and enduring partnership. Never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. I'm delighted that the inspiring Nobel Nobel Prize winner.
True democracy is citizen-led. We demand a people's house!
This project has always been about fixing the foundations of our country. It must be really incredible to be part of building, I mean, actually here, not just building. Smash the gangs to smash the people smuggling gangs. Could you please join me when I say 5?
That man is not allowed in my pub.
4.
That's assault.
3.
That man is not allowed in my pub.
2.
Get out of my pub. Go on.
1.
Get out of my pub.
Yay! It worked.
Perhaps not necessarily some of the bits that Keir Starmer would have chosen over the past 5 years, but it is a remarkable 5 years. A lot has happened since then in politics in general, but specifically for the Labour Party. What do you think Keir Starmer's successes and failures have been in his 5 years as Labour leader? And I'm really interested to hear from viewers and listeners as well, 0344 499 1000. But James, tell us what you think first.
Well, I think that from those clips you just showed is how much politics has changed and how much Keir Starmer has changed with them. He has proven himself time and again to be a cynical and successful political operator. He is ruthless when he needs to be. So one moment he's pro-Corbyn and anti-Trump, now he's pro-Trump and anti-Corbyn. He is someone who will adapt to the changing circumstances, ride with the punches. Remember, of course, you just played a clip from when he was thrown out of a Bristol pub. I think it was 21 or 2022, when his leadership and authority over the party were by no means so established. And yet what he's done as a politician is take the Labour Party after its worst defeat for almost 100 years, since 1935, and take them back and win them the third biggest majority ever in 5 years. That has been an extraordinary achievement. Less so has been his success on the international stage. As a statesman, there's been lots of talk, etc. But I think they came into government underprepared. But as a politician, he has got the A+ in terms of making his party successful and electable again.
And certainly things are very, very different, as you say, to how things were with under Jeremy Corbyn. There's something that continues within the Labour Party in at least some degree, and that is the spectre and the problems and the accusations of anti-Semitism. Now, Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has been accused by the Israelis, an Israeli embassy official today, saying that they believe that he did not and should have talked about the hostages in his Eid message. Let's just see what he has been saying in that message. This is the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, in his message for the Muslim festival of Eid.
Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. As the Mayor of London, I would send my warmest wishes to everyone celebrating Eid here in London and around the world. Of course, this year, for many, the usual happiness we feel during Eid will be tempered by the appalling suffering and killing that continues in Sudan and Palestine. More than 50,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza as a result of Israel's ongoing military campaign, including more than 15,000 children. These betrayals of humanity should weigh heavily on our collective conscience. But I'm proud that while the international community has chosen to avert its gaze, Londoners have not.
The Israelis have said, an embassy spokeswoman said, firstly, we would like to emphasise to Mr Khan that the war is a result of the brutal and horrific attack by Hamas, a proscribed terror organisation in the UK, which was imposed on Israel on the 7th of October. It is alarming that throughout the message there is no mention of Hamas or any condemnation of terrorism, and a call for the release of 59 hostages that are being held in horrific and inhumane conditions. Well, a spokesman for the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says he has strongly condemned the actions of Hamas, saying the Mayor has repeatedly conveyed his outrage at the attacks by Hamas on Israel and has strongly condemned these acts of terrorism. He is deeply saddened by the loss of all lives and continues to support calls for a permanent ceasefire. James.
Well, I mean, you know, it's the accusation that's going to be thrown against him as well. I mean, you could talk about anti-Semitism, but for me, the more pertinent accusation is saying different things to different audiences, right? So this is a Eid message. He's therefore talking about the sort of Palestinians as the victims in this, of course. And then, of course, there he says in an answer and a message to the Israeli embassy, he raises this into press reports. Hang on a sec, he's talking about something very different. He's talking about all lives are a tragedy. Look, I think you could mention the conflict in Gaza and what's going on there in a much more sort of nuanced way than he managed it there. If you are going to start apportioning blame, as you say, I think then he could have brought into the fact that, clearly Hamas should release the 59 hostages there. So I think it's just another example. And I do think that, Sadiq Khan, now in his third term, I suspect he won't stand again. He had a chance perhaps to, I think, maybe try and be much more of an inclusive mayor. But I think that if you look at how he's perceived to have handled the whole issue of Gaza since October the 7th, I think many would feel that he very much talks to some communities but not others.
I agree with you, James. Also, all deaths in the Middle East are not a tragedy. If Hamas terrorists die, that's a good thing, and I'm not going to shed any tears whatsoever. James Heal, thank you. James is Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. What do you think of all of this? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Leslie says, Peter, what a hypocrite Starmer is. He fawns now over Trump after all he said about him. It's sickening. On young people working or not working, we're going to get to that in a second. This person says, I have teens and I totally agree that their attitude stinks a lot of the time. However, my lad who's still at school is desperately looking for a part-time job or even work experience or volunteer work, and it is impossible. I really feel for the ones that want to get into the world of work. So many barriers. Gone are the days of paper rounds or casual Saturday work. And Suzanne in Southsea says, not all young people are lazy. My son has just graduated and was looking for a job using his degree in sports management. After applying for hundreds of advertised jobs and failing to get even a reply, he found approaching CEOs directly on LinkedIn was more successful. As soon as he got to actually speak to someone, he was offered interviews and got offered 4 jobs in 1 week. It's not easy for these kids. Luckily mine have confidence and can think outside the box. Love your show, says Suzanne. Suzanne, thank you. And yes, it's all about contacts and approaching people. And certainly, I mean, we have a work experience person coming in on Sunday, for example. She just messaged me on LinkedIn and said, can we come in for a, sit in the control room with the producers through the glass for a morning? And I said, yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, that's one way that we get people in here, for example. And she just approached me on LinkedIn, absolutely fine. And sometimes you do need to be a little bit sharp-elbowed, don't you? It can be difficult for young people. I actually had lunch today with a very bright young woman who is doing a journalism course and trying to get work in journalism. It's a notoriously difficult industry, and there's so many parts of our economy where there is the enthusiasm, there's just perhaps not the know-how or the contacts in order to get jobs. So it's often worth, I think, Suzanne, what your son did there, just approaching people on LinkedIn. Really good idea. The personal touch is a good one. Also, I was chatting to someone actually, another young person recently who went for a job and didn't get it, but got a very nice reply. And he said, got a reasonable reply from the person I went for the job with. What should I do? And I just said, look, reply to them and ask to go in and do maybe a little bit of work experience or even a couple of days or something. You never know. And once you're inside the building, once you're inside that office or that factory or that workplace, you just never know what might happen, and they'll remember you. And if you say, okay, I'm sorry I got this rejection, it's a shame, but actually I'm still really keen. What can I do the next time to be a strong candidate? How can I get from here to there? What kind of skills and things can I develop? Sometimes it's more training. There are lots of different ways around this, but it is tough out there. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the programme. In fact, I think it's next actually with Maxwell Marlowe. He's Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute, asking the question, and there are loads of reasons for this, why 500,000 young people have never worked. Stay with us here on Talk.
we say, well, the starting point we say is, in fact, the criminal justice system has got this very wrong, and the level and the threshold of what is an expert is so low that that evidence is allowed to go before the jury. That's a starting point. But in fact, I've gone to the best in the world, and I've simply said, look, can you just tell me what was said before the jury? Is that an accurate reflection of these hospital notes? And they've all said no.
Right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Amanda, who says, good afternoon, Peter. Sadiq Khan is an utter disgrace. He is not only systematically ruining London, but now blatantly supporting Hamas and grossly insulting all decent Jewish people. The rules must be changed to limit the times Americans stand for office. Well, I'm sure Sadiq Khan would deny all of that. A spokesman says the mayor has repeatedly conveyed his outrage at attacks by Hamas on Israel and has strongly condemned these acts of terrorism. He is deeply saddened by the loss of all lives and continues to support calls for a permanent ceasefire. We'll keep talking about that if you want to. 0344 499 1000. Also, another big story we're talking about today, 5 years of Starmer, and John has been in touch with a voice note on this. This is what John has to say.
I think Starmer's biggest success has been to remove far left bonkers Corbynism from mainstream politics in the UK. That kind of brand of politics which is all about hate, anti-Semitism. It still exists, but it doesn't exist at the top table.
Well, thank you to John for that. I want to talk about something that clearly Keir Starmer will want to deal with. In fact, he's called it a moral issue, in that 1 in 8 young people are not working or studying. Well, actually, the figures are really mind-blowing here. We've got more than 500,000, I'll try not to bombard you with figures, but there's more than 500,000 young people who are not working or studying that have never had a job. 987,000, nearly 1 million people aged between 16 and 24 not in work or study. It's been rising in recent years. Starmer said he's been genuinely shocked, but some of the analysis here, the Learning and Work Institute found only a minority were actually unemployed and looking for a job, which you would expect the majority of them would be. But actually, the majority of these young people, 59%, said they were unavailable for work. Well, why are they unavailable for work? Sickness is the primary reason. 27% of young people not in education, employment or training said they're not available because of a long-term illness. A long-term illness. So you're talking about nearly, at least 250,000 young people aged between I'm just doing a back of the envelope calculation here, between 16 and 24, not looking for work at all because they've got a long-term illness. That's a proportion that has doubled in a decade. Well, let's make some sense of this with Maxwell Marlowe. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Maxwell, some of these numbers are really quite astonishing.
They really are, aren't they, Peter? I mean, it's really difficult out there for young people. I'll start off with that. You referenced on the last bit of your show, people are finding it really difficult out there in the job market. And actually, a lot of this is to do with the lockdown. And when you look at the data that's presented by the government, we see a really sharp uptick in youth, what we call NEETs, not in education, unemployment training, since the restrictions were lifted. And that's got a lot to do with, firstly, how the job market has changed since the pandemic. There's a lot more, essentially, I'd say efficiency within a lot of jobs. Everything's become digitized. We require less people in person. So that's one thing. Second thing is that when you look at that youth job market, we're talking about skills here. And, a lot of people during university would take internships, they would take training periods whilst they were studying. And during the lockdowns, this just wasn't available. And that's really demoralized a lot of young people, who want to go back into the job market. I'm pretty sure these young people want to work. And I'm sure your listeners and viewers are, with young kids and kids who are just going through university, hearing that they want to go out and find a job. It's just incredibly difficult out there if they've been deprived of those opportunities during lockdown and through that pandemic period. So I think it's mostly down to mental health. People are too anxious. They're worried about getting rejected. They apply to hundreds of jobs. They get really downtrodden. So I think it's a mental health problem more than anything. And it's another issue facing the UK and how essentially the NHS deals with these people, because they should be getting the help they deserve.
It's interesting that in December, January and February, there were approximately 816,000 job vacancies in the 3 months to February 2025. That's a slight increase from the previous quarter. There were, in 2022, there was a peak of 1.3 million jobs. So there are many jobs vacancies, but actually there's so many different aspects to this. One of them, Stuart has pointed out on WhatsApp messages and says, Peter, one of the problems about employing young people now is that 18-year-olds are on the same minimum wage as 22-plus-year-olds. Given the choice, the more experienced older employee who has proved they can get up every morning will be chosen. Are the odds stacked against young people, Maxwell, do you think, or are some of them just lazy, or is it both?
I think the odds are stacked. I mean, full declaration of bias here. I'm what you call a young person. I'm 25. People who work at the Adam Smith Institute, for example, we tend to be much younger, but we're all highly productive, very engaged, very motivated young people. So perhaps we're rare for that group, who knows? And I don't want to downtread my generation, but actually, the point made, about minimum wage is absolutely correct. I've been speaking to friends who live up in the north of England, for example, who are really struggling to find work, essentially, because there are people who are older than them who are, with more experience and on the same wage. So why wouldn't you take that really simple economic calculation? There's also the issue when you talk about those unemployment statistics, Peter, that you're right, there are multiple aspects. There could be different skills varieties, different sectors. It's also down to location. And because young people don't really have any money, and we're going through inflation and the cost of rent's gone up massively, if those jobs are outside of where you grew up or where you're living with your family at home, it's really hard to move around. So I think what would be interesting, and some work that probably needs to be done, is students who are leaving university, say in the southeast, in London, Oxford, Cambridge, etc. What are their chances getting onto the job market compared to people who are educated up in the north of England, Newcastle, Durham, Leeds, Lancaster, etc.? Because if the jobs aren't there where you are in that one place, it's really hard to sustain yourself over the medium to long term. If you're constantly looking for jobs, you'd have to move home, and then you've got to find other places. So the odds really are stacked against young people, I'd say.
Okay, Maxwell, thank you. That's Maxwell Marlowe there. He's Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. What do you think about this? Are there young people watching and listening who are really affected by this? I'm sure there are concerned parents, there are concerned grandparents as well, thinking, do you know what, they're not a bad young person, but they just can't find a job. They're trying, or maybe they're not trying. Maybe there are people who are not trying. Maybe there are people who are just saying, I'll take the benefits, or perhaps even swinging the lead on this one. I'm sure there are a lot of people who, coming through lockdown as well, it's a big, big issue as well. I wonder how the legacy of that is something I think we're still beginning to understand. Tracy in Northampton's given me a ring, and you can too, 0344 499 1000. Tracy, what would you like to say? Hello, Tracy.
Hello, darling. What I'd like to say is, I think that if they don't want to work, right, don't give them no money, put them in the army and make a man out of them.
What if they're a woman?
Or a woman. Put them in the army. Why not? We need people to recruit. They don't want to work. Why should they sit at home and do what they do, drugs or whatever, or they can't be bothered to work, or they don't want this job and they don't want that job? Well, you've got no choice, love. You either go in the army or you take that job that the job centre's offering you, or whatever. So it's up to you.
Tracy, I think it's interesting. Rishi Sunak had a sort of similar idea, talking about some form of national service. Now, the army and people I was talking to in the armed forces will say actually that they don't really want people who don't want to be there. They want people who do want to be there. But
well, that's tough. But it would get them off our streets, wouldn't it? It would get the gangs.
But what about these 250,000 young people who say they're too ill to work? What would you say to them? If a doctor has said, do you know what, this is correct, and they're not well enough?
Well, some of these doctors need shooting for a start. You go in there with anything and they'll just say, oh, it's this, or it's you've got problems with your head, or
okay, we're not advocating shooting anybody, Tracy, just to say, but clearly you think there are people who are and there are doctors that are signing people off that shouldn't be.
Yeah, because they can't be bothered to just give them a note and say you're sick, or you've got this, or you've got that. And then they go out. This is why there's so much crime in this country.
It's not just young people who are criminals, though. But what about the legacy of lockdown, do you think? I mean, we told people to stay at home for a long time, people in their developmental years. They didn't see parents or neighbours going out to work. Do you think that's had an effect, Tracy?
No, we're over COVID now. Get over it and get to bloody work.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? But there's jobs there, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is why I'm sick of hearing, oh, well, that's why the immigrants come over, because the immigrants do it for nothing and all that. No, make something of our country and get Great Britain back. Make them go into the army, whether they like it or not, and they got to go in there and make a man instead of carrying out on gangs, on the streets, selling drugs and doing what they do.
Okay, Tracy, thanks very much. Obviously, not all young people are doing that, but Tracy does illustrate a point that, the devil makes work for idle hands. Mark in Norfolk says, please tell your listeners to stop using pointless online large employment agents. Take a well-printed CV, go and see the companies you want to work for. Our 19-year-old son did that, and on day one, he had 2 job offers. In 40 years as an employer, I gave jobs to 2 cold calling ladies. One of them I employed for 10 years. It shows willing and nerve. Rare qualities, says Mark in Norfolk. Well, good for you, Mark, and good for your son, and I hope he's very happy in his new job, and well done to him. And I sometimes just, when there are so many applicants, a tiny thing can make a difference. Where did that CV come from? Oh, the guy came in, the young woman came in, she left it with reception. Could make a big difference. We're going to talk about this as time goes on. Tell me your stories about this and tell me your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. And just next, we're going to talk about an anti-abortion campaigner who has been found by a court, as you've been found guilty by a court, of breaking a no protest zone. She got a fixed penalty notice. She decided not to pay it. It's gone to court. We'll get some reaction from the Academy of Ideas to that in just a second here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch on Twitter as well. I've been looking at some of the messages during the break there. Angie says, afternoon Peter, back from work, feet up and cup of made and now watching you. There are many generations of families that have never worked and this is the default for them. We need more apprenticeships for young people. And Ian says, Sadiq Khan's comments always echo Corbyn where he never calls out terrorist violence but instead says all violence utterly despicable. Thank you to Barry, who says, it's always been difficult for young people. Peter, nothing new in that. As for being put in the army, people who advocate that usually haven't tried it themselves. I think Barry, from memory, Barry was in the army himself, actually. This person says, regarding unemployed youngsters, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and stand on your own 2 feet used to be the sayings. How have we evolved into a nation of snowflakes? Simon in Lee on Solent says, Cardi P, I'm 41 and there are literally no jobs available for me. I've run pubs for 20 years, but even I'm struggling. So think of the young people, Simon. I'm sorry to hear that you're struggling. I hope you find something soon, and I hope that your skills can be put to good use. There's so many pubs closing as well, which is a really sad thing. I'm really lucky in that I have a wonderful boozer near me, and I will be doing the buying some food there. I'll be buying some booze there, and well, not booze, but Diet Cokes anyway, and I will be doing the pub quiz on Sunday night. Enid says, hi Peter, it's demoralising for young people looking for work. My grandson left university last year and has been applying for anything and everything. The majority of companies don't even have the decency to respond. Please don't let people tar all young people as lazy. Well, Enid, clearly your grandson is someone who does have a bit of wherewithal, and I hope that pays off very, very soon. I hope he finds something. Let's talk now about this court case, a woman called Livia Toski-Bolt. She's 64. She's been found guilty today at Poole Magistrates Court after holding up a sign which reads, here to talk if you want, near a Bournemouth abortion clinic in March 2023. She was given a fixed penalty notice for breaching an exclusion zone outside an abortion clinic. She's been found guilty of doing that. And the judge says, I accept, this is District Judge Orla Austin, says, I accept her beliefs were truly held beliefs. Although it's accepted this defendant held pro-life views, it's important to note this case is not about the rights and wrongs about abortion, but about whether the defendant was in breach of the Public Spaces Protection Order. There's also lots of interest from the United States on this as well. Alistair Donald is Associate Director of the Academy of Ideas. Alistair, what do you make of this?
Yeah, hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Well, I'm a little bit worried about this decision. I mean, perhaps the judge didn't have too much space for manoeuvre because the laws that have come in recently have led in this direction. I mean, I've been someone that's been concerned for quite some time now about the way that spaces within our cities have become narrowed and have become places where you're not allowed to speak reasonably freely and to express the opinions that you hold. And I think this is an instance where we should be concerned about it. Not, I would hasten to add, because I agree with the sentiments expressed by the protester, actually, but more on a principle that I think that we're narrowing the boundaries of free speech, and that's somewhat worrying.
But what you could do in this, let's play devil's advocate for a second. If there is a 150 metre exclusion zone around this abortion clinic, two things. One, if this person had stood 151 metres away and held the sign, there would be no problem. And similarly, as the judge says here, and I actually don't blame the judge in this, it's important to note this case, the judge said, is not about the rights and wrongs about abortion, but about whether the defendant was in breach of the Public Spaces Protection Order. If that person, Livia Toski-Bolt had been protesting against Gaza, about Gaza, for example, or been protesting about Save the Whales, she'd still have been protesting in a non-protesting zone, and that's the point that as the judge sees it.
Yes, I agree. That's the point that he's expressed, and I think yes, that's been expressed. But nevertheless, I still think this is about narrowing the boundaries of free speech, because if you look at the orders that are used to make these exclusion zones, then what you see is that one of the concerns that have been expressed in making these bits of legislation is the possibility of influencing people in a certain direction. And I think in a free society, you have to have the capacity to be able to influence people. Now, I'm also actually, as it happens, someone who I don't particularly like these protests. I think they're often they're unnecessary quite often, and they're putting pressure on women who are in a difficult situation. And
do you think this protest was unnecessary, Alistair?
Well, I possibly or possibly not. I mean, I don't know I can't predict what's in that woman's mind any more than the police can.
What we do know in this particular instance is that abortion clinics are often providing services to people who are emotionally distressed, who haven't.
That's what I'm agreeing with.
I'm sort of agreeing with your point, but making a further point. I mean, I remember a place I used to live. There were people who felt very, very strongly about this particular issue to the extent that it was when I was a student. I remember there was a campaign to people who put pins through condoms that were given out to people because they were against artificial contraception. There were people who stood outside abortion clinics handing out baby clothes, saying these are the clothes your baby would have worn, you've murdered them. And I do wonder about, I mean, this is the home of free speech on this station, and I just wonder about the limits of free speech, because it's not universal, and I wonder, should it be? And maybe you could take that point and tell me what you think about it.
Yes, so I think there is a quite reasonable argument that some of these protests and even these just holding up signs are heading in the direction of invading the privacy of people as opposed to being a free speech issue. I sort of accept that. But in the bigger picture, what we're living through just now is a period over, for most of this century, where the right to express ourselves is becoming more and more narrow, and the state is encroaching more and more on determining what it is that's a rightly held or wrongly held opinion, and when you can express those opinions. So as a point of principle, I think it's worth, at this point, standing up for people's right to express those ideas, even while expressing the sentiment that they should go and protest somewhere else, which protest 160 yards away or whatever to fulfill the rule. If she's inside, I still think it's worth defending her right to say what she has.
And it's a lot as well, I think. I mean, she was supported by the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a conservative Christian pressure group. My view on abortion is really straightforward. It is that they exist and they will always exist, and abortion will always happen, has always and will always happen. I don't want it to happen. I wish there wasn't a single abortion. It would be brilliant if there weren't any, but there will be. They will happen, and it should be done in a legal and safe way. That's my really straightforward view on it. The point, though, on free speech, I think, that you make is really interesting, Alistair, because the judge, I agree with you, probably had no option here because she was breaching a public spaces protection order. The discussion, I think, that needs to be had is perhaps not clouded with the abortion issue, which I'm happy to discuss if anybody wants to ring me and talk about it, but it's about these public spaces protection order. That, to me, is the, as I think you're saying as well, perhaps, Alistair, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but actually that's a bigger issue, and whether they're the right thing or not, whether it's around abortion clinics or anywhere else where you actually can't protest, that's another and very worrying issue, or certainly something that should be debated a bit more than it has been, perhaps.
Yes, no, that's you're right. That's more or less what I'm saying. I agree with you on the abortion issue. I'm pro-choice myself, but I'm worried about the fact that we're more and more cutting out people's right to say what they want, and to a reasonable extent when they want to say it. And I've even accepted that this is kind of not ideal, and in many ways these forms of quite personalized protests that we're seeing these days would be much better done as political protests and protested against the laws that are infringing on people's rights. I'd far rather that was the way these things happen. But unfortunately, they're not. And, precisely because they're not, and precisely because we do struggle very much in this country to protect free speech, then I think it's worth defending, even although I recognise there are actually probably far, far bigger free speech issues that we could talk about. I mean, the situation in where people are finding themselves in employment tribunals or arrested for what they've tweeted or what they've said, in universities where free speech is widely clamped down upon. These are really, really big free speech issues, and in some ways you'd rather be talking about them. But the fact is that this case has been highlighted and seized upon on both sides, I think, as it happens, and made to become a barometer of the way that we should think about free speech. So in that situation, I'm more keen to defend free speech than to give any ground at all to those that say it should be constrained.
Alistair, fascinating talking to you. That's Alistair Donald. We'll get you on again soon, the Associate Director of the Academy of Ideas. Bob in Cheltenham's been in touch and says the judge was absolutely correct applying the letter of the law in this abortion clinic buffer zone case. There are ways to challenge this buffer zone legislation. This lady shouldn't have wasted the court's time by appealing this penalty notice, and she shouldn't have been used or encouraged by others with their own political agenda, according to Bob in Cheltenham. He says, great show as always. Paul says standing outside abortion clinics with signs or silently praying is passive aggression, not free speech. Lots as well well on young people working or not working. Helen's been in touch and said, I worked at a senior school for 15 years. The school had to stop 2-week work experience in year 10 because of behaviour. It was becoming embarrassing. Tim says in Suffolk, he says, lockdown is a problem, isolated people. However, the university education doesn't help. Degrees with no relevance to the work life, just information retention. We need to see more vocational training. Tim, I agree with you on a lot of that. I'm a big fan of apprenticeships. I'm a big fan of people getting as much on the job experience as possible. Although, you know, I did an academic degree, I did history and politics, and yeah, okay, that politics has some relevance certainly to what I do now, but not everything. And I know a load of journalists who've gone into journalism without a university degree, for example, and I mean, that's just one sector that I know, but there are lots and lots of other places where, you know, once you're inside the building, once you're inside that factory or that, whether it's a car mechanic or an office or wherever it is, that's when you get the real experience that you need. Leslie says, Rayner's employment's rights are a barrier to get the young people into work, rights from day one, including sick pay. What business is going to want the hassle? Leslie, that's a very good point. Also, from this week as well, the national insurance problems for the rises, talking about perhaps £2,000 or more to actually employ someone. Lots of businesses already telling us that that is kicking in and influencing their choices on that. One more before the break from Gary, who says, I couldn't disagree more with your earlier guest who tried to paint Keir Starmer as a sharp political operator. The man literally stumbled across the line in the general election with the smallest share of the vote of any winning party in living memory and possibly even in history. In fact, I'm not sure the bloke even understands himself how he got to be Prime Minister. You only have to compare the way he addresses the public to the way the likes of Trump and Farage speak to us to know that the one thing, he definitely is not a smooth political operator. He was just lucky to be in the right place at the right time. When the pandemic came along, the Conservatives imploded and became unelectable. I'm not quite sure of your statistics there, Gary. I know the Labour Party got something like 33% of the vote. That was pretty low, certainly, but they have a majority of 411. I'm happy to discuss whether the electoral system in this country should be changed. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We'll take more of your calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, and indeed, you know, telepathic messages, smoke signals. However you want to contribute to the programme, we will let you have your say next.
We say, well, the starting point we say is, in fact, the criminal justice system has got this very wrong, and the level and the threshold of what is an expert is so low that that evidence is allowed to go before the jury. That's a starting point. But in fact, I've gone to the best in the world and I've simply said, look, can you just tell me what was said before the jury? You know, is that an accurate reflection of these hospital notes? And they've all said no.
Right.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ollie's been in touch on Twitter. He says choosing not to work is only possible for most because the state benefits are too generous and easy to come by. Trim them back and watch many of them rise from their sofas. Soph says, my friend runs a newsagent. He pays £40 a week for mornings and the same for evenings. He had both roles going and I couldn't get anyone to work, and some of those that did gave up or were unreliable. He gave the job to a pensioner who did both. Richard is querying about the 12 vacuum cleaners. You're just going to have to stay tuned. We're going to talk to Joe Wheeler a little bit later on about the beautiful weather that is in many parts of the UK and why she has 12 vacuum cleaners. Richard says, what on earth is that about? Well, you will find out. Thank you to Angela, who says Kemi will be long gone before the next election. Ainsley is out and about leafleting. I think Ainsley involved in perhaps a political party. We'll have my earbuds in leafleting today. And Luke has been in touch saying, always a pleasure to listen to your show, and his mother's got a new rescue dog whose name is Marley, hashtag adopt don't shop, and has sent me a beautiful picture of Marley. So all the very best. We've got Luke's name, we've got Marley's name, we haven't got his mother's name, but I wish her all the best, whatever her name is. Leslie says, my local garage owner said he won't employ a young lad again. They arrive late, hungover, constantly on their phone, then mummy rings in to say he won't be coming in. He's ill. Ian in Colchester says, we voted on proportional representation some years ago, we rejected it, perhaps we were wrong. Technically, it was the alternative vote system, but yeah, it's a form of proportional representation, but that's the kind of cone-headed academic answer you get from this show. Right then, let's speak to Kevin in Ayrshire about jobs for young people. Kevin, thanks for the call. What would you like to say?
Hi, yeah. I'd just like to say, don't tag everybody with the same brush.
Definitely not.
My son is definitely, he's a workaholic, and he's just turned 18 last week. He left school because he hated it. And he got a job as an apprenticeship, and he actually does 55 hours a week.
Wow, that's a lot.
A lot. It's not what the law says he should be doing, but the company asked him to do it.
Is he happy to do it? Does he get paid overtime?
Yeah, he gets paid. He gets paid for the hours that he's worked. Obviously, with its own minimum wage in it.
Yeah. And what does he actually do, Kevin? What's his apprenticeship in?
It's working mechanics.
Okay, brilliant.
With a company, but I mean, he's getting good training.
Yeah.
I mean, he started just last year, and yes, he's long hours. He complains a little bit about the hours, and he's tired and stuff. But not once has he phoned in sick.
Yeah.
Not once has he asked me to phone in sick for him. He turns up on time and finishes whenever he's asked to do overtime. He does it.
There are a lot of people who don't find that is the case with some young people and some older people as well. We all know their varying degrees of commitment. But I mean, Kevin, you must be very proud of your son. But what about his friends? Are they doing the same thing?
Some of them are doing the same thing. Some of them are still at school. Some of them are away to college. You know, it's just there's a mixture.
Yeah.
You know, but just because they're young and they can, you know, they missed a lot of school through COVID and stuff like that. You know,
do you think that had an effect on young people's attitude to work? Not your son, obviously, but perhaps other young people you've encountered, Kevin.
Maybe, but I think it stems from the parents. You know, there's a lot of people that I've known growing up that the mum and dads didn't work, and they've joined the bandwagon and didn't work as well. You know, and it's almost like a hand-me-down of how to play the system.
Generational worklessness. What on Kevin? Are you someone who's worked hard through your life? You ever been unemployed or ever anything like that?
I've been unemployed for 3 weeks, and I'm 54.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was unemployed for 3 weeks and I found a job. Certainly that was back then, but I was prepared to do anything.
Yeah.
You know, rather than get on the dole. But when I was listening to it there was a caller said about get the youngsters into the army. You know, that would not work. And I can say that for experience because I am still in the army.
Oh, right. Okay.
I joined when I was 30 years of age, and I'm still in the army. And I can tell you now that it just wouldn't work because the training staff are very professional, but the kids of today, if they don't want to do something, they won't do it.
Yeah.
You see that in schools. You know, the teachers are in a class with their hands tied behind the back and almost with a blindfold on at the same time. You know,
and presumably what a number of people in the military have said to me at all levels, Kevin, have said to me over the years I've been presenting these programmes, they've said to me, look, we don't want people who don't want to be there. We don't want people who have been forced to be there. We want people, yes, it's a basic training is a very, very difficult thing. It's something I could never do. But if you want to be there overall, we'll knock you into shape and we'll make sure we'll sort of build you up. But if you just don't, if you're not there by choice in some way, it's pretty much impossible.
It is, yeah. I mean, the training methods has changed even when I joined it. When I was joining when I was 30 years old, the training methods have changed, and it's got a lot. The fact the army said to change the system because obviously the people that are coming in now are not as robust as what younger people would have been years ago, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you get people there that didn't want to be there, there's no way they're going into their beds at 6 o'clock in the morning to go for a run, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You must be very proud of your son, Kevin. You're very good to ring in about him. I hope he hears this. I hope maybe it's on in the mechanics, or maybe you can look back on YouTube later on or something. I hope he hears this. Your pride shines through, and I hope you tell your son you're proud of him.
Yeah, definitely do.
Brilliant.
I definitely do.
Great stuff. Well, listen, lovely to talk to you, Kevin in Ayrshire there. Thank you for that. That's Kevin in Ayrshire there. And what a great call. And it's good to know that there are lots of young people out there. On free speech, loads of people getting in touch. Stuart says, Peter, I'm usually a free speech absolutist, but this case troubles me because a Christian can pray for these supposed souls at home or in church, but the reason they choose to do it outside these clinics is simply because they hope to intimidate the women into changing their minds. I'm not an advocate, Stuart says, of abortion, but I do believe in a woman's right to choose, and the last thing they need is the religious trying to manipulate them during such an already traumatic time. Well, listen, I'm sure Livia Tosky-Bolt, who had the sign saying here to talk if you want, would say that that's not intimidatory. Certainly, lots of people getting in touch about this. We'll continue to talk about this as time goes on. We're also going to have a yak with Michael Yaki, who is a US political analyst and former senior advisor to Nancy Pelosi, a former speaker of the House of Representatives, on all these tariffs, what's happening from an American perspective. Want to make sure you get your comments in too as well. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell here between now and 7 o'clock. Trillions has been wiped off the US stock market and around the world by the tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed as President of the United States. We'll talk about what's happening here in the UK, how Sir Keir Starmer, who's celebrating 5 years as Labour leader, is responding, and get your views on all of that. We're also going to talk about Israel accusing Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, of promoting, as they put it, Hamas propaganda in an Eid message. That is what he denies doing. The Eid, of course, the Muslim festival. And we're going to talk this artist, Sir A.P. McCoy, the 20-time champion jockey and Grand National winner in 2010, because the big race is, of course, tomorrow at Aintree. Maybe you're having a flutter this weekend. We'll talk to A.P. McCoy coming up a little bit later on. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you want to get your voice on the air and tell me what you think about anything we're talking about today. Abortion rights, free speech, the person who's been had her fixed penalty notice upheld because she held up a sign in an exclusion zone to women going for abortions, reading, "Here to talk if you want." Should that have been upheld? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note or a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Well, the FTSE 100 index, the financial timeshare exchange of the 100 biggest companies in this country, that index has suffered its biggest daily drop since the start of the pandemic, closing down 419.76 points. That's down nearly 5% of the value of the 100 largest companies in this country. That's been wiped off, and that is because of Donald Trump's tariffs, or reaction to that. Now, maybe things will rally, maybe it'll get better. Certainly Donald Trump thinks it will, because last night he was remaining optimistic despite the unsettled global markets.
We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom. And the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many, many years. For many years, we've been at the wrong side of the ball. And I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The thing that people have to talk about, we're up almost to $7 trillion of investment coming into our country. And you'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
Do you share Donald Trump's optimism? 0344 499 1000. We can also hear how the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, what he has said on the UK's response to those tariffs.
The choice before us was whether to jump into retaliatory action with both feet at the get-go, or to continue with our calm approach of trying to negotiate a deal that will mitigate the tariffs. I think the second course is the right course.
Well, it's really interesting. We have 10% tariffs here in the UK. In the EU, it's 20% tariffs, so clearly that's one of the benefits of our Brexit. And it's interesting if you look at some of the places like Vietnam. Vietnam, for example, 46% tariff rates from the 9th of this month. So what's that? Next Tuesday, is it? Wednesday. They're going to have a 46% tariff rate from the 9th of April. And also, Donald Trump has said that Vietnam wants to cut tariffs down to zero, and he wants to do that, or can do that, if they negotiate a deal. There's lots around as well about a deal between the United Kingdom and the United States as well, whether that could happen, whether there could finally be a trade deal. And actually, at Prime Minister's Questions this week, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, who was the Trade Secretary under the Conservative government, well, Keir Starmer saying, why didn't she negotiate a trade deal? We could have dealt with all of this and got it all sorted out before these tariffs came in. Let's speak to Michael Yaki. He's a US political analyst, a former senior advisor to Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, who was, of course, the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And Michael, I suppose the biggest story or the biggest development in all of this is the additional 34% levy on US goods in retaliation for Trump's tariffs that China is imposing. Do you see that simply as inevitable, and do you expect other countries will follow suit?
Well, certainly China, I think, had pretty pushed in that position. You know, Trump has made no bones about the fact that he has made China his #1 target in terms of trade. The tariffs are punishing, and I think China, it was almost inevitable that China was going to react in a similar fashion. Now, the issue is here that Trump thinks of the world in a very binary fashion, right? He thinks, when you hear him talk, he's talking about, I'm going to negotiate with the UK, I'm going to negotiate with Vietnam, I'm going to negotiate with whoever. It's a standpoint of, I don't believe in global trade, I don't believe in global economics, I don't believe that there's a global economy. There's only one economy, the American economy, and we're just going to negotiate with individual countries that he thinks he can do to his advantage, not understanding, of course, that everything is linked together. And someone like Vietnam may decide, well, I'm just going to export a lot more to the UK, for example, and see what impact that might have. These are the things that, you know, don't cross his mind. But if he continues on his way, if countries react like China has and start essentially a tariff war, you know, we're being plunged back into the 1930s, and that's why Wall Street is so nervous. That's why the FTSE has gone down as much as it has. It's because we've seen this playbook before, and that playbook resulted in the worst recession/depression the world has ever seen in the 1920s and 1930s, when basically global trade dropped 65% as a result of the tariff wars initiated in large part by the United States.
Part of what advisors to politicians do, and I was one to 4 cabinet ministers here in the United Kingdom, is try to get inside their head and to try to work out what they're thinking, how they're likely to react, what they're likely to do. I mean, Donald Trump has talked about America first a lot of the time. He's saying it's going to be a boom, it's going to be fabulous, it's all going to work out. Why do you think he has done this per se? I mean, you talked obviously about the way he sees things in quite a binary way, but for his base and for the many millions of people who voted for him, will they look at this and say, well, actually, this is going to put American trade in the driving seat, almost literally, when it comes to car imports?
Well, I mean, I think the only thing you saw really at the press conference the other day were the auto workers, because without a doubt, the one industry that could probably benefit, would be the auto workers in the United States. When you put a 34% tariff or so on Japanese cars, Korean cars, German 25% on German cars, and Jaguars, Land Rovers. Remember, that's still that tariff on autos is still out there, regardless of the 10% floor they're talking about. You know, these are things that he's playing to that one constituency, but that one constituency isn't the entire United States. And that's where we have some issues here, because one of the things that I think he hasn't quite figured out is that if it becomes more expensive to buy goods that were formerly less expensive, the headphones I'm wearing, or you know, the jeans someone is wearing, that there's less money to buy a car. So, I mean, these are things that sort of have a knock-on effect that I don't think he's quite grasped yet, but Wall Street certainly is fearing that may happen, and that's why you see, you know, global markets tumbling all around. I mean, you're right, Peter. Both you and I have made a profession of trying to get inside a politician's head and understanding where they're going and what they're thinking. But I'm not too sure if anyone is quite sure what's going on in Donald Trump's head, other than whatever he simply repeats on a day-to-day basis. What the thinking behind it is going to be something a lot harder. Yeah.
So with that in mind, what would you advise our Prime Minister, our Trade Secretary, Keir Starmer and Jonathan Reynolds, what would you say to them in terms of getting the best outcome for the United Kingdom? Because there does seem to be this idea that if a deal can be done, in perhaps the same way as what happened with Canada and Mexico, these tariffs can actually just disappear very quickly and things can move very rapidly. We've heard Donald Trump talking about Vietnam, for example, with its 43% tariffs as well.
Yeah, I think that look, if you're looking at this from like a TV crime show, It's like you've got a bunch of people out there. Whoever gets first to the table and makes the best deal is going to get that best deal, and it's going to be to the disadvantage of everyone else out there. I think it's in the Prime Minister's best interest to try and get in there. Explain once again, hey, we really have a trade surplus. We really don't have much of a deficit with you. By the way, the invitation to state dinner could be downgraded to a pint on a bench somewhere. So let's start talking about
doing that's going to happen.
Exactly. I mean, these are the things that I think that the Prime Minister has weapons at his disposal. But I think getting in there first, being the first to make a deal, is going to be important, because everyone else is going to be trying to get in there. And then the interesting thing, of course, because we're all in a region here, is what will the EU do? Will the EU break apart? I mean, one of the things that you see within the rhetoric of certainly his advisors and the president himself is that he's hoping that this binary approach to trade will break up the EU, that different countries will.
And I have a point in that as well. It'll be very interesting to see what happens in the EU and what they can actually do within the rules. But in terms of your country, in terms of California, for example, we've seen the governor there, Gavin Newsom, possible Democratic candidate at some stage for president, saying that actually if there are retaliatory tariffs, that he wants California to be treated differently. Is there, we're talking about the EU perhaps saying different things. What about the states in America as well, of course, who have such great power, especially if they have an economy the size of California?
No, you're true, especially with the fact that AI industry, high tech. I mean, tech is getting just killed right now on the stock market. And think about the reliance on chips from Taiwan. Think about the fact that there's a lot of manufacturing that Apple does in China. Tariffs going. I don't know if the administration quite understands that if there's a tariff coming back on Apple products that Apple is outsourced in China, coming back here, iPhones are going to be going through the roof. And these are the kinds of I wouldn't call it complexities, because I don't think it's that complex. The thing about, I think you understand, I think most of the people listening to this broadcast understand it, that everything's related, and you just can't simply say, well, I'm going to put it, I don't like the fact that I have a trade deficit with country A, I'm going to raise the prices here, and somehow not going to have any impact on anything else in your own country.
Michael, thank you very, very much indeed for your thoughts. I will happily buy you a pint and sit on a bench with you and put the world to rights the next time you're in my part of the world. You're very, very welcome. And thank you. And apologies, I made an error there. I referred to 43% tariffs on Vietnam. It's actually 46%. There's a lot of facts and figures. Apologies for making that error. Let me know what you think about all of this. 0344 499 1000. How optimistic are you in all of this? Steve says, great show as usual. Some reasonable perspective on the stock market gloom and doom peddled by the mainstream media. Compare the drop in value with the increase in value that occurred post-Trump inauguration, about some zero. So what's the problem? Leslie says, how much has Starmer and Reeves inflicted on the UK with their tax hikes? We are paying far more than 10%. You're right, Leslie, but it's in addition to that if we fire them over to America. And what about all those workers who are building cars, and if those jobs go? That's a very, very big issue. Andrew's in Halifax and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, what do you make of all this?
Well, I'm pretty optimistic about things in general, but as I said to your researcher, there is a very big fly in the ointment here, and it concerns the part of the world where you were born and the part of the world where my ancestors come from. Because of Boris's bodged Brexit negotiations, Northern Ireland will have to impose EU tariffs on US goods coming in, which puts them at a disadvantage for the rest of the country.
Although there are, I agree with that, and I think it is a risk. There are others saying, I was hearing from a watch manufacturer the other day saying we're manufacturing watches in Belfast. Actually, they may not go to the Swiss, they may go to us, because the watches are going to be to the same standard but cheaper because of things that are of universal desire, I suppose, in America. Expensive watches. I mean, that's not going to save the economy of Northern Ireland or of the UK. But Andrew, perhaps there are some chinks of light in this?
Well, I'm hoping so, because I really had to laugh when Donald Trump was on about annexing Greenland, and there was all this hue and cry from various EU leaders saying we respect the territorial integrity of Denmark and we respect the sovereignty of Denmark over Greenland. Well, they didn't give a damn for our sovereignty over Northern Ireland when they insisted on putting a trade border down the Irish Sea. They didn't care less about that.
Some would argue Boris Johnson didn't either, and he accepted it.
No, he didn't.
Perhaps even accepted it without reading it properly. Well, listen, it's a debate that's going to run and run, but Andrew, thanks for your thoughts on it. That's Andrew in Halifax there. Certainly many would agree with Andrew's thoughts on that. We're going to talk in a second about Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. There's a row between him and the Israeli embassy here in London because they've accused him of parroting Hamas propaganda, as they put it, in his Eid message. Eid is, of course, the Muslim festival at the end of Ramadan, and we'll be hearing from Nicole Lampert about that in just a second. Let me just read out a couple of messages just before the break on the abortion issue, the free speech issue we're talking about in the last hour. If you missed it, that's this woman who has been gone to court. She breached one of these exclusion areas around an abortion clinic. It's 150 metres. You're not meant to protest around abortion clinics. She did with a placard, a sign that read, "Here to talk if you want." She was given a fine. She refused to pay the fine. It went to court. And there are a number of people with their views on that about whether that should have happened or not. One person, Lorraine, says, "I find it very concerning that a white woman gets found guilty for silent protest, albeit inside an abortion clinic boundary. The awful Palestinian hate marches can scream from the river to the sea, advocating annihilation of Jews repeatedly, week after week, and no action is taken. Totally double standards in a two-tier justice system," says Lorraine. Now, the Metropolitan Police would say they have arrested some people for those, but Lorraine, I'm with you. I mean, not nearly enough on that horrendous phrase on many of the placards that are held up at those marches. Not nearly enough policing, not nearly enough arrests, not nearly enough charges brought against those people. Another person says, "Can you imagine a sergeant major shouting commands at some young man? There would be many court cases against the army for ill treatment." Certainly this debate goes on about what we should do with our young people, 500,000 of whom do not have, say they're too ill. Well, about 250,000 say they're too ill to work, and 500,000 of them have never worked, and about 1 million who are not working at the moment for whatever reasons. As I say, we'll talk about Sadiq Khan in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
We say, well, the starting point we say is, in fact, the criminal justice system has got this very wrong, and the level and the threshold of what is an expert is so low that that evidence is allowed to go before the jury. That's a starting point. But in fact, I've gone to the best in the world, and I've simply said, look, can you just tell me what was said before the jury? Is that an accurate reflection of these hospital notes? And they've all said no.
Right.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Angela, who sent me a tweet to say there are also exclusion zones around schools to limit religious protest. So when does protest become intimidation? If you stray into those zones, I guess you're breaking the law. Well, yes, you are. That's what happened to the woman we were talking about earlier. The lady with the sign was being passive-aggressive and would not move on, so got arrested. Thanks to Mark as well. I made a joke about people sending me smoke signals. He sent me a little gif of smoke signals. And also James Cox has been in touch. He says, you're right about the wonderful weather. Greetings from beautiful Hertfordshire. He sent me a lovely picture of a very bucolic scene there, which looks lovely. He says, great show as usual. Thank you, James. Good to know you're watching or listening anyway in lovely Herefordshire. Apologies, Herefordshire, not Hertfordshire, but Herefordshire West rather than north from where I am. Let's talk to Nicole Lambert now. She's a journalist and covers a number of issues. And just before we do, I actually just want to remind ourselves about what Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, said in his Eid message. Eid is, of course, the festival at the end of Ramadan, and he sent out a message that's been highly criticised by many people, including the Israeli embassy here in the United Kingdom. And I just want to remind ourselves what Sir Sadiq has been saying.
Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. As the Mayor of London, I would send my warmest wishes to everyone celebrating Eid here in London and around the world. Of course, this year, for many, the usual happiness we feel during Eid will be tempered by the appalling suffering and killing that continues in Sudan and Palestine. More than 50,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza as a result of Israel's ongoing military campaign, including more than 15,000 children. These betrayals of humanity should weigh heavily on our collective conscience. But I'm proud that while the international community has chosen to avert its gaze, Londoners have not.
Not so sure about that one. Israel has, the Israeli embassy has said, firstly, we'd like to emphasise to Mr. Khan that the war is a result of the brutal and horrific attack by Hamas, prescribed terror organisation in the UK, which was imposed on Israel on the 7th of October 2023. It is alarming that throughout the message there is no mention of Hamas or any condemnation of terrorism, and a call for the release of 59 hostages that are being held in horrific and inhumane conditions. Well, a spokesman for the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, insisted he had strongly condemned the actions of Hamas, saying the Mayor has repeatedly conveyed his outrage at attacks by Hamas on Israel and has strongly condemned these acts of terrorism. He is deeply saddened by the loss of all lives and continues to support calls for a permanent ceasefire. Nicole Lambert is a journalist who follows these issues. Nicole, what do you make of this?
I, as a Jewish Londoner, am quite worried by this. It feels to me like he's trying to rile up anger. He's not only repeating Hamas talking points, but he's going worse than that. He said that 50,000 people had been killed as a result of Israel's military campaign. All that the Hamas figures show, and even they are disputed figures, is that 50,000 people have died over the last 18 months. And that includes natural deaths, that includes stillborn babies. So he's gone further than that.
They've also been revised down, haven't they? I mean, Hamas have actually revised down those figures as well. And I mean, you as a journalist and I as a journalist wouldn't trust Wikipedia if it said that. So why are we trusting why is Sadiq Khan trusting a terrorist organisation?
Because it feels like he's determined to rile up community anger. And then the other thing that upset me is this kind of dehumanizing language by saying that it was a betrayal of humanity. And I've been interviewing this week Simon Sharman, who talked about, he's done a show about Auschwitz and talked about this thousands of years of dehumanizing language towards Jews. And this feels like the latest iteration of that in terms of saying that somehow this is outside of humanity and therefore it's right to hurt Jews. That's how I would see it. And that's why I would say it's particularly dangerous. And then he talks about Londoners and how they're on the right side, but presumably he's not talking about Londoners like me. So he's deliberately dividing Londoners up into the good Londoners and the bad Londoners. He said
while the international community has chosen to avert its gaze, I'm not sure that is true at all, Londoners have not. And they're not just gazing on the Middle East, they're not just, they're coming out every couple of weeks and having mass protests, some of which are incredibly anti-Semitic in terms of what people are saying, signs they're holding, things they're chanting about from the river to the sea, for example, which is an anti-Semitic phrase. There's no nuance here in that, is there? Or maybe there is nuance, but it's a nuance in one direction.
I don't really know what he means by Londoners, but if he means the marchers, then there's not very many of them anymore. There were at the most around 300,000, but now that is smaller. People can see that it's a war, not a genocide, despite what people like to call it. It's just a horrific war, and people saw that there were ceasefire deals, and in those ceasefire deals, hostages were returned, the fighting stopped, and that Hamas could stop this war tomorrow by simply giving up, which it should do. It needs to give up its arms, and there's fights going on within Gaza, local people who are demonstrating against Hamas and saying we've had enough of this. I'm not surprised. It's a horrific, brutal war, as all wars are. And they are also calling that the hostages should be returned, as most of us are. So there's fighting going on within that world, within Gaza, but there's no nuance to that. All he sees is bad versus good.
And very few people of what I would call the usual suspects who tweet and say a lot of things in the public domain about what's going on in the Middle East, who are incredibly silent when it comes to Gazans themselves rising up against Hamas and the torture and murder of those people, and we don't see nearly enough about it in the media. Just tell us some of the detail about that. I know you follow these things very, very closely, Nicole, and there may be, our viewers and listeners may not be entirely familiar with what's going on there. Just expand on that point. There are people within Gaza who are rising up against Hamas, and they're being brutally quelled.
Yeah, so last week there were about 4 days of demonstrations. It's hard to know exactly how many people were doing it. It's between hundreds and thousands of men, mainly calling for the end of Hamas, calling them terrorists, saying to return the hostages. Occasionally they're saying that, but also just saying we're sick of this war. We don't want any more death. The result, and I spoke to two of the people on some of the days that they were demonstrating, and they reiterated that they are against Hamas and they are against this war. They've had enough of it and they want to leave the country because it's so miserable there. And they don't really want Hamas's rivals Fatah either, because they see them as equally as corrupt and dangerous. What they want is peace, and that's understandable, because I think that's what most people in the world would want, peace, but that is not what Hamas wants. It's not in their charter. So by the weekend, around 6 of the main organisers of these demonstrations were brutally murdered. There's one in particular, and he was videoed being tortured, and then his body was put on the steps of his family home. This situation is ongoing in terms of the demonstrations have been quelled, but even today there's images coming out of Gaza, and it looks like some of the family members of some of these demonstrators are fighting Hamas militants inside of Gaza. So it may be that the demonstrations will continue. It's hard to know. Hamas is a fascist organisation, which, as we can see, is incredibly brutal even to people within Gaza. And it should just be said that those 6 people, for example, who will be killed, their numbers will be attributed to Israel's killing them. That's how it works. Everybody that dies in Gaza is attributed to Israel.
Yeah, and you can't. Neither of us is saying, of course, Nicole, that lots of people haven't died in Gaza. That, of course, has happened. But the question is, how many of those are through natural causes? How many of those are terrorists as well? And how many of those are innocent civilians? We just don't know. Back here in the UK, just a final question for you, Nicole. I wonder how you assess this, because we have Sadiq Khan saying what he has said today, and I reiterate that his spokesman says the mayor has repeatedly conveyed his outrage at attacks by Hamas in Israel and has strongly condemned these acts of terrorism. He is deeply saddened by the loss of all lives and continues to support calls for a permanent ceasefire. But the question I want to ask you is that we've got the anniversary today, 5 years of Keir Starmer as leader of the Labour Party. Has he rooted out anti-Semitism in the Labour Party? We know Jeremy Corbyn, who I firmly believe is an anti-Semite, and he is welcome to sue me if he wants to. He is out of the Labour Party, but there are still clearly there are at least questions over senior figures and their attitude to both Jewish people and to Israel, not least from our viewers and listeners. Paul says, how can London's Jewish community now believe they're supported by their mayor?
Yeah, well, I don't feel supported by him at all, and it's interesting that Keir Starmer hasn't said anything about this round, Sadiq Khan. He's the only person that's more senior in some ways to Sadiq Khan, because it's kind of like I have Jewish friends saying to me, what can we do about this? And there's nothing we can do. He is meant to be our mayor, but he's certainly not speaking for us, and it feels like he's speaking against us. The only person that can kind of bring him into line is Keir Starmer, who's been silent over this. In terms of the broader issue of has anti-Semitism been quelled, no, there are still senior figures within Labour who are problematic, and Labour itself has a problem in terms of there are quite a few constituencies that we know of where Muslim people, and I'm certainly not saying all Muslim people are on the other side of this war or anything like that, but where there's a kind of block and they feel under pressure by that block. And of course, if we remember, we go back to the election, then people who were deemed not to be speaking up for Gaza enough had people going up against them, and even Jess Phillips, who's very pro-Gaza, some of her people had their tyres slashed and things like that because this became such a problematic issue in the run-up to the election, and that's not been addressed at all, really.
Nicole, thank you. Nicole is a journalist in London. Thank you for that, Nicole Lampert there. Rachel's been in touch on text 87222 with the word talk in the text. Rachel says, if I was Jewish and I lived in London, I would be annoyed and concerned by Sadiq Khan's comments today. He is supposed to represent all Londoners, including Jews. This man is so divisive, and London deserves a mayor who inspires to unite Londoners, not divide them. Well, we'll take your thoughts on this. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Loads of people getting in touch about young people working or indeed not working as well. Plenty of your calls coming in just a minute here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Lots to talk about today. And one thing that quite a number of people have been in touch about is this issue of free speech and the woman who was protesting outside an abortion clinic. She had a sign that she was holding up simply saying that she was there to talk if people were happy to do that with her. But she was inside one of those exclusion zones. She got a fixed penalty notice that you get one of those if you're speeding or if you are parking on a double yellow line or whatever. She appealed it and went to court, and today she has been told by a judge that she's got to pay the fine. And this is just such a big issue in our society. It's a very important issue as well, because it's about free speech, but it's also about the issue of abortion and who can be influenced when. And when you have a right to privacy, and of course these things can come up in all sorts of uncertain ways. I wanted to speak to Fiona from East Sussex, who's given me a ring about this. Fiona, you have a story. I know it was quite a while ago, but I'm sure it is something which is preying on your mind today, Fiona. Just tell us what happened to you, if you don't mind.
Not at all. So 35 years ago, my first pregnancy, baby got to about 18 weeks and then died.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Fiona.
Yeah, my son, I lost my son. So what happened is, because everybody thinks that abortion is something that is, not necessary and chosen by people, whereas I'm obviously very pro-abortion, that the NHS were great, but when I had to go in to get the baby removed and do it the hard way, they give you drugs and you push the baby out, I got stopped by people who were protesting about abortion. I didn't have the energy to explain what was happening.
Nor should you have to.
And then I went into the place, and the nurse there was somewhat the same. I mean, less rude, obviously, because it wasn't her job. So I had to explain to her that this wasn't a live baby killed. This was a baby who'd already died and needed to be born intact so that I could see him and, and say goodbye.
Yes. So when you went to that clinic then, what were those protesters saying? They were holding up signs, they were... They were holding up signs, two different ones. There was always at least two together, and two different groups approached me. I was already in a real bad mental state, you can imagine. Of course. And finding the words to make them go, I couldn't explain it to them. I ended up just pushing past them because, man, it was a tough enough day. I didn't need somebody shouting at me. Did they stand in your way? Did they try to prevent you getting to the clinic? Yep. Okay. Yep, they tried to block the entrance to the gate, and anyway, I got through. But yeah, it's just now that I don't know how many people are like me. I don't understand it. I haven't researched it, but people should be maybe a little bit more cognitive. That sometimes people do bad things for good reasons. There are loads of reasons why people have abortions. Your reason is, of course, one that was or the reason you were at that clinic, I should more accurately say, was something that these people clearly did not understand. Could you understand why they were there, what their motivations were, or is that just something that you can't get your head around? I can't, God, that was 35 years ago. I still can't get my head around why people think that they are allowed to be so intrusive in someone else's life decisions. So these exclusion zones, these 150-metre zones, do you think they're a good idea? I think they're a good idea because they couldn't at least block the gate like they did to me. Mm-hmm. I think, the people just shouldn't be allowed to do it. But I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel. Every time this topic comes up. You don't have to apologise at all, Fiona. Your view is a perfectly valid one. It's come up from you talking about it today. I'm back in the shaking state. I'm back remembering how bad that felt. I'm back feeling punished for something that was not my fault. It absolutely was not, and I'm so sorry to hear that those emotions have come up. But I think what you've done, Fiona, is you've spoken very bravely to a national station about your state of mind both now and previously, and you've illustrated something, and we've heard from you, and we've heard about this in a way that I have never heard about it, your particular circumstances. And I don't know what the percentages are, but the people that are shouting at other people need to do some serious research and understand it. I mean, I'm 65 now, right? And it's still blowing my mind when it gets mentioned. What were you able to do? How were you able to say goodbye to your son? Were you able to bury him? How does that work? They were brilliant. Once I got in and once the nurses understood what was going on, the switch flipped and they were all lovely. They even sent it wasn't a priest, but anyway, a religious person in to be with us. My husband was obviously there. My sister came, all sorts. They give you drugs that forces your body to deliver the baby. So you do a proper full baby delivery. And then when the baby's born, even though it's dead,
They wrap it up for you and they give it to you, and you have as long as you need to say goodbye to your baby. And then they, I think they cremated him, or I agreed. I can't remember now, too many years ago. But I did have a little tub with his ashes in, which I needed to help me grieve.
Did you name him, Fiona?
Yeah, Alistair.
Alistair, lovely name. Good Scottish name.
Good Scottish name, yes.
And did you have children?
I did. I've got a daughter now. She's 34. Her name's Katrina, and she's brilliant. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, listen, we really want to thank you for sharing your story, and you've just brought a whole other aspect to this to so many people. So, Fiona, I wish you well, and thank you for the call. I really appreciate that. And if you are affected by these issues, you can go to talk.tv/helplines, and there are all sorts of organisations listed there that can help you if you are in mental distress or you're affected by what Fiona was affected by or something similar, or you're considering your sort of mental options at the moment, your emotions at the moment. You can certainly, we don't want to upset anybody, but obviously a lot of the stories that we do cover on this network are sometimes things that can be very emotional. Fiona, I think, spoke brilliantly there, illustrating her story and just saying that these things are not just quite as simple, they're not just as black and white sometimes as they are portrayed. Another big issue that people are talking about today is young people and whether they can get jobs and whether they are trying to get jobs in some circumstances. Lawrence is from Gloucestershire. Lawrence, thanks for the call. What's been your experience of all of this?
So my experiences with all this is that I've been a universal claimant for nearly since I turned 18, and I've been trying to find actual work, trying to find proper jobs. There's not enough support for everyone. For example, trying to find some kind of employment skill hub for anyone. There's literally no support for young people. And I have to make ends meet somehow. The only way of me doing that is actually to keep on my feet, is actually go to self-employment work, work for these gig apps like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, but their pay is absolutely awful. I've been trying to find work here and there.
So have you ever worked, Lawrence? You said how long has it been since you turned 18?
So I turned 18 on the 25th of September, and so basically a long time now. I'm turning 23 this year.
Okay, so it's been 5 years. And have you ever had a job or any work?
Nowhere. This is what I'm saying. We need more organisations to help with young people to get into work, find work. Instead of them going through the stress of saying, "Oh no, my grades are not great. My grades are awful. I'm gonna claim benefits because my mental health is not 100%." And I've been on universal credit, and I completely hate it.
What would you like to do, Lawrence? What job would you like to do?
My job I would like to do is retail, and when I was before COVID, I was doing volunteer work in multiple volunteer shops, just to get that level of experience up and try and actually have a good time of life. And
when you go to places, if you drop your CV in or you talk to different shops, what do they say to you?
They basically say, "Oh, we'll contact you back if something comes up." I've had nothing came back, and this is a sad part of it. Is that people are advertising on Indeed, job sites, all of this lot, saying there's work around, but they do not want to take people on if they're on benefits because they don't understand the principle about benefits.
Okay. Well, listen, I wish you well, Lawrence. Keep us updated, and if you do manage to find things, give us find something. I wish you well. 5 years is a heck of a lot of time to be unemployed, and I wonder about, it must be so frustrating. I mean, we can hear the frustration in Lawrence's voice there. We're going to continue to talk about this. We're also going to talk about the Grand National, which is coming up tomorrow, and somebody won the Grand National, in fact, in 2010, was Sir A.P. McCoy, who is coming up in just a minute. Stay with us.
anything that's state-backed is obviously an advantage for a dental business. You're guaranteed a pot of money if you perform these UDAs. But unfortunately, these targets and the regulatory system around these targets is just getting too overwhelming for most dentists, hence why they're leaving the system. And because these targets, like any kind of health professional will tell you, is that it kind of forces you to see the patient in a more dehumanized way, as a means to an end to fulfilling your target rather than an end in themselves.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you probably know it's the Grand National tomorrow at Aintree. It's going to be live on Talk Sport at 4 o'clock, but covering it for ITV will be the legendary 20-time champion jockey AP McCoy, Sir AP McCoy, who will be covering it for ITV. He joins us live from Aintree now. Sir AP, thank you for joining me today. I know you won the race in 2010 with Don't Push It. Who could forget that? I just wonder who you've got your eyes on tomorrow and who you'll be backing.
Yeah, I was very lucky to win it in 2010, Peter. On Don't Push It was an amazing day. Tomorrow, I actually tipped I Am Maximus to win the Grand National last year. I was very sweet in him, and I think he could win it again. He could do a tiger roll and back it up, but he is going to be a pretty sharp price. But William Hill are playing 6th place in the Grand National, and I think that one of Willie Mullins' other horses, Grange Clare West, has a really good chance. He's about 25-1. A couple of runs back, he was second at Leopardstown in the Irish Gold Cup behind Gallop and Deschamps, and he had the likes of I Know the Way, I think, behind him. He just might have a little bit of class, and at a big price, 25-1, he might be the one, but I still think that I Am Maximus could win a second Grand National.
What goes through your mind when you are when you're a jockey racing in the Grand National? It must be an incredible thrill, but also a big time of anxiety as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, look, I've got 4 sisters, 1 brother, Peter. None of them have ever been on a horse in their life. I'm not from racing family, so the Grand National was probably the first horse race that I ever heard about. I remember my granny back in Last Suspect at 50-1 in 1985. But to ride in the Grand National, I had 14. I won it on my 15th attempt, so I had 14 failures in the Grand National, and 3 or 4 or 5 of them were probably favourites. So, what goes through your mind? In the Saturday morning of the Grand National, you're going to win, and you leave here afterwards, and all you want to do is cry because it's going to be another year before you get another go. So the disappointment, because it is the most famous horse race in the world, it is the biggest race in the world, and as a jockey, you want to win it. So I had 14 disappointments, but luckily on the 15th go I managed to win. So there was a huge excitement, a huge relief, and probably a huge fulfillment as well.
I mean, you're obviously an incredibly talented and successful jockey anyway, but why is the Grand National so special? I mean, it's steeped in tradition, it's steeped in history, but winning the Grand National is something so much more special, I'm sure, than even the other successes you've had.
Yeah, it is, because it is, you know, it's obviously once a year. It is the most famous horse race in the world, and you can walk down the street as a jockey, and you know, even though I think that the best horse wins the Cheltenham Gold Cup, you can walk down the street as a jockey, and no one will ever ask you for the Cheltenham Gold Cup. They'll say, "Oh, I'm a jockey." Say, "Did you ever win the Grand National?" Yeah. So for a long time in my career, I had to say, "Yeah, I rode in the Grand National, but I never won it." But so there is a lot of fulfillment, a lot of relief, and a lot of satisfaction when you do win it. So it is different. It is different from every other horse race, and it's the one horse race that those people once a year that have a bet will sit down and watch the Grand National and have a bet.
And there are people who once a year will have a bet. I'm one of them. I've got a tenner on Duffel Coat, which I think will probably not win. But
you like the name, obviously.
I like the name. You'll perhaps tell me don't push it with this question, Sir AP, but I just wonder what you would say to people who are looking at the Grand National this year? They're thinking about horse racing. Perhaps they don't think about it at all. Who will think about the horses that don't make it, the horses that die, the 4 horses who died in 2023 at Aintree, for example? What would you say to them in regard to some scepticism that perhaps people have about horse racing?
I don't think really I'd even answer to them. You know, we are very lucky that all of us in the sport love what we do. We look after our horses the best we can, and you know, it is a fabulous horse race, and I wouldn't give them the airtime of talking about it whenever it suits them once a year, when they don't care for the rest of the year. So it is. I would love in my next life to come back as a racehorse. I can tell you that they're so well looked after, and they're a joy. As I said, I didn't get into horse racing because I wanted the idea of coming to Aintree or Cheltenham and big stages. I get into horse racing because I loved horses. I loved looking after them as a kid. I loved being with them. So, you know, I'll continue to do that, and so will everyone else in the sport.
Sir AP, have a brilliant day tomorrow. Enjoy it. I'm sure you will have many more interviews like this to go and do. I know you're covering for ITV as well, so thank you for speaking to us today. That's Sir AP McCoy. He's a retired 20-time champion jockey. He was live at Aintree there. He, of course, won the Grand National on Don't Push It back in 2010. He is covering the Grand National for ITV. There'll be coverage as well on talkSPORT. Of course, the race is at 4 o'clock. And I should remind you, of course, I was talking about gambling there. It is one of the very few times that I gamble. And if you do gamble, please do so responsibly. Remember to do that, of course. Dorothy in East Kilbride has been in touch. I'd just like to say the compassion you show to callers with the very sensitive stories is why you're a great presenter. Dorothy, thank you for that. I appreciate that. On the matter of Sadiq Khan, his view is one-sided for the people of Gaza. As Mayor of London, he must represent Londoners and not have a political agenda. Great show, as always, says Dorothy. Well, Dorothy, thank you for that. There have been a number of other people who've been in touch as well. I mean, I think it's Fiona is the one we need to be praising for coming on a national station, relating her experience and giving, you know, another element to that story that I personally had not previously considered. There's so many different issues we cover on this programme. Tariffs are a big one as well in terms of the financial health of our country and the world. We know that the FTSE 100 has gone down by nearly 5% today, and Chris in Epsom's give me a ring about that. 0344 499 1000. Chris, tell me your thoughts on this and what Donald Trump has done, and perhaps even how Keir Starmer has responded.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to send my hugs and best wishes to Fiona for a really heartbreaking story. I am a member of the Free Speech Union. I attend their meetings. I am pro-choice, but I do believe in that 150-metre exclusion.
Okay, yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, Chris, yeah.
Also, talking about the Grand National, one of my dearest friends, who unfortunately is no longer with us, Broderick Munro Wilson, rode his own horse in the National in '88.
Wow, okay.
And was doing very well until he crashed the Beechers. The stirrup broke. Anyway, tariffs.
Tariffs, all the tariffs. You're covering a lot of areas. What do you make of tariffs, Chris?
Well, first of all, we were paying 6% in the first place. So we've only had a rise of 4% across most things. The car industry the most dangerous man in the world, I think, at the moment, it used to be Miliband, but I think John Reynolds has taken his place now, spouting that he wants to do retaliatory tariffs.
Well, they're thinking about it, but they're also, in fairness to Jonathan Reynolds, both he and his boss are saying, let's just calm down a bit here. Let's see what the best idea is. I mean, what do you think is going to happen, Chris?
His boss calmed him down. That's the first decent thing Starmer's done. Reynolds was up for retaliatory because he doesn't know. Let's face it, he's a liar. He's a failed solicitor, but he's as bad.
Well, he wasn't a solicitor in the first place.
Yes, yeah. He never made the grade, and he's not making the grade as business secretary either. I mean, it's not rocket science to go over there and do a deal. What Trump's done, if you look at that TikTok board that Trump had, all right, all he's done is put on 50% of the tariffs that other countries charge him. The USA and Great Britain, when it was great, we've had 30 years of offshoring our industries. We're buying slave-made solar panels and wind turbines from China. That doesn't seem to go against the grain, against this ideology of net zero nonsense. I support Trump 100% with what he's done. And if the countries don't like it, then they need to get on the phone and do it, or go and see him.
Do you think that the UK will now do a deal, Chris? Do you think
Yes,
the circumstances are right?
Yeah, listen, the EU charges has approximately a 400 million trade surplus with the USA, and they charge the USA, I think it's 29 or 30 something percent on a tariff. The EU is the biggest protectionist bloc in the world, and Europe's been relying on America for defence and sucking the life out of them, right, with tariffs. The rest of the world has been just taking their businesses, their intellectual property rights, and building it abroad, and then selling it back into America. And let's face it, right? Trump's already got $1 trillion promised for reinvestment into industry.
We've got to leave it there, Chris. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're just going to hit the news, and I do apologise. Did give you a good opportunity to put your points forward, which I think you did. Lots more to come on this, on tariffs, in just a few minutes, actually, here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. This is Talk Drive, and if you are at a little moment there, apologies. I was thinking about my shows tomorrow. I'm on between 10 and 12:30 tomorrow and 10 and 1, and that's not Talk Drive, that's just Talk, so it can be a bit confusing, but this is indeed Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell, and thank you for your company this evening. It's just gone 6 o'clock, and there's lots to talk about, including the FTSE 100, the index of the 100 biggest companies in the UK. Well, it has fallen by nearly 5% because of Donald Trump's tariffs. We're also talking about all sorts of issues this hour, about NHS dentists dentists, saying that they may not exist in future on the NHS anyway if urgent action isn't taken now. You might remember last week I spoke to Mark Jones, who's the founder of Toothless in England. I'll be talking to him again. He has been speaking to government ministers. Where are we with that? Let me know your thoughts on any of these issues, including we had a really fascinating call from Fiona there earlier on, where she talked about the fact that her unborn baby had very sadly died and she had to go to an abortion clinic, and there were protesters there who were in her way, actually physically blocking her getting to that clinic. Well, is that something that people should be allowed to do? Because there's a woman today who was protesting outside an abortion clinic. There's a 150-metre exclusion zone. Where does free speech meet privacy, meet the rights of the individual? Very interesting. If you want to talk about that, or indeed anything else, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. The main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll play out as many of those before 7 o'clock as we can. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I'm here between now and 7, then Kevin O'Sullivan's going to take over between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then what just happened between 9 and 10. Lots to discuss this evening here on Talk. Just one more on the abortion story, which is really it's horrific and it's fascinating at the same time. And Anna has been in touch, sending me a message on WhatsApp saying, I had a termination and I felt under great pressure by the NHS to take my baby away because at the time I didn't have a very nice partner. I was too scared to tell my parents because of religious reasons. I think if I had seen the pro-life protesters outside the clinic, they may have changed my mind, as I had no support with the NHS. I still think of the terrible experience I went through, having to go home with medication and a friend helping me who was a nurse. I was so full of guilt and traumatised after this experience. I would have been glad of the support from pro-life protesters stopping me outside the hospital. The NHS let me down. Talk TV is a great show. Thanks for highlighting this, says Anna. It's really humbling doing this job, and I love doing this job, and speaking to people like Fiona, hearing from people like Anna, I just remember that there are so many people and you just don't know their stories. And one of the great things about broadcasting is that you can tell people's stories and people can anonymise themselves, people can use different names sometimes when they ring in. We often don't ask too many questions because they're just telling us their story. We obviously make sure the story is true and as much as we can. And certainly what Fiona talked about and what Anna has added to the debate today has opened my eyes to a lot of this. I'm a man, I don't have children, I've never had to make a decision with anybody in regard to an abortion or to have a child. That's not something that's been in my life, but there are lots of people who have had that experience and for all sorts of reasons have had abortions or indeed not had abortions. It's a fascinating topic, as is the issue that I highlighted a second ago in regard to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience and privacy when you're having a medical procedure. It's a really interesting debate and we're going to continue to have it, and if you have thoughts on it, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let me know your thoughts. Big story across the world as well in regard to tariffs imposed by President Trump. He had that press conference where he talked about the various different tariffs, including 10% for this country, 20% for the EU. And last night, Donald Trump was remaining optimistic despite the very unsettled global markets.
We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many years. For many years, we've been at the wrong side of the ball, and I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The thing that people have to talk about, we're up almost to $7 trillion of investment coming into our country, and you'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
Well, John in Kidderminster has been in touch on what Donald Trump has done. He says, my pension has lost £15,000 in value since Wednesday. That's what the Trump tariffs have done for me. Hopefully it's just a blip, says John. Well, Keir Starmer has been responding to this 5 years as Labour leader today. We can see what he has said on the UK's response to the tariffs.
The choice before us was whether to jump into retaliatory action with both feet at the get-go, or to continue with our calm approach of trying to negotiate a deal that will mitigate the tariffs. I think the second course is the right course.
Well, that's Keir Starmer there, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Former advisor to both the former Foreign Secretary, Lord Hague, William Hague, and indeed Theresa May as Prime Minister is a man called Denzil Davidson, who joins us now. Denzil now works for Global Counsel. Denzil, thanks for joining us this evening. Foreign affairs are your bag and have been for some time, as have relationships with the European Union. I wonder, Denzil, what you think Keir Starmer should do and what he will do, especially in what we've seen from China imposing an additional 34% levy on US goods in retaliation for those tariffs.
Well, I think the approach he's taking now is probably the right one. I mean, we are not an economic superpower like China, like the EU, so we have a different set of choices from them. If you're going to try to get a deal, you need to, retaliation now is probably the wrong choice. And what the government is trying to do is to get Trump into a place where he can negotiate some kind of cut to the tariffs, maybe some better arrangements on some other issues. So that means now, as the Prime Minister said, not retaliating right away. But there's also a good chance that this won't work. And then he will face the tougher question of what to do then. And he has to factor in other considerations as well. What does a trade row do to the security relationship that's so important to us? And what does it mean for our relationship with our European neighbours? So he's got a lot of stuff to juggle.
You talk about that security relationship, and we know what's going on in Ukraine, for example. Keir Starmer is in a very different position to some NATO allies, and particularly the NATO ally that is Donald Trump. I just wonder, when you look at the economic side of things, the defence side of things, two absolutely key points of the relationship with the United States, has the special relationship done us any good in the last number of months since Donald Trump became leader of the free world?
A bit. So Trump quite likes Britain, which is good news for us, whereas he really doesn't like some other countries. But the fact is that he is in a very, very different place from any American president that has ever come before. You know, he likes Russia. He's leaning to Russia's side in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He isn't committed to defending other democracies or working with other democracies in the same way. And he isn't really doing us any favors on trade. The tariffs he's put on us are the result of our smaller or no trade deficit in goods, unlike some other countries which do have a surplus in their trade in goods. So not really so far on the economics. Maybe it'll turn out to be some help because we will be able to cut some kind of deal which will mitigate things, improve certain aspects, perhaps on digital. It's helped a bit on the security side, is that Keir Starmer has been very careful in his diplomacy to keep the channels of communication open with President Trump and put him in a bit more of a constructive place on Ukraine. But we shouldn't overestimate how far our influence goes.
You were a very senior Conservative advisor in a number of administrations, and I don't really want to talk about how Keir Starmer has done domestically, but as Prime Minister in regard to international affairs, do you think during his time as Prime Minister, and indeed as Leader of the Opposition as well, that he has done a good job?
Well, up to a point, I think it's fair to say. He's seen across the world as a grown-up. He's done well in his diplomacy on Ukraine and in bringing other countries together to support Ukraine. And Ukraine is crucial to us because it's the front line of defense in Europe against Russian aggression. And Russia, if Russia wins in Ukraine, they won't stop there. They will go for other countries. And of course, they will carry on conducting their campaign of sabotage and subversion across Europe. So it matters directly to us. But the criticism I'd make of Keir Starmer is that there isn't a clear strategy. There's lots of good tactics, but there's no clear end goal, given how the world is changing, given America's protectionist turn, given its abandonment of its allies. What's the big response to that? What's the big plan? And it isn't clear that Keir Starmer has an answer to that.
Just in terms of the tariffs point, we saw tariffs being imposed and then disappearing very quickly on Mexico and Canada. Do you think the same thing could happen with the United Kingdom if we do a trade deal quickly?
Well, the thing about President Trump is that he's highly unpredictable. He likes to change his mind. He likes drama. Now, drama is really bad for trade and business. Businesses don't want drama, they want predictability. So his approach to life, to governing, is going to be bad under any circumstances for trade and for the economy, the American economy included. Could this stuff go? Maybe some of it, but he's trying to do a set of different things, all with tariffs. And Trump's problem is that he can't achieve all of them at the same time. So he's trying to bring industry back to America. That's one thing. He's trying to raise money from tariffs so he can cut taxes elsewhere. And he's also using it as a lever to get countries to do things which aren't to do with trade. Now, you can't do all of those things at the same time, or at least with the same tariff. And what it looks like is that on steel, and we export some highly specialized steel to the US, on aluminium, on cars, he's trying to reshore. So he probably isn't going to move there, and that's going to be a problem for parts of our economy. On some other stuff, yeah, it might be negotiable, like whiskey. We export a lot of whiskey to the US. There is perhaps room for change.
Thank you, Dental. Appreciate that. Dental Davidson, former advisor to William Hague as Foreign Secretary, and indeed Theresa May as Prime Minister. Dental Davidson there now works for Global Council. Dave is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Dave, we've tried to get you on a couple of times without success. I'm delighted we can chat now. Apologies for that. What would you like to say on tariffs?
I just think all this fawning over Keir Starmer as if he's played some kind of half blinder. It's just complete nonsense. We can't take. It's not a Brexit opportunity. We can't take advantage of this simply because we have national insurance. Who's going to set up anything here? We have Angela Rayner running around with her employees' rights bill. We've got Mad Miliband running around with his energy bill. It wouldn't matter if our tariffs were zero and we still had Brexit. We still couldn't take advantage of the opportunity anyway.
But we're in a situation still that by the time a car gets produced, when it went to America a week ago, it was cheaper than now. But also if that car is produced in Germany, for example, they're slapped with 20% tariffs. We're only slapped with 10%. Surely that's better than being in the EU.
Yeah, but so what? You're just talking high-end Range Rovers. Americans don't buy any other kind of cars from us. You're talking.
I mean, they buy thousands, tens of thousands of cars from us. That's people's jobs.
Yeah, it is. But I agree. But it's peanuts in terms of what's going on. The FTSE's gone down 5% today.
Yeah.
5%. It went down 5% nearly yesterday. So if we had this fantastic 10%, aren't we lucky chaps, the FTSE wouldn't be down anywhere near that, but it's gone. And it's a much, much bigger picture now. This is all about whether China back off and whether some of these other countries, that's what's going to bring all the stock markets back up. And frankly, Keir Starmer is like a deer in the headlights. He's not...
Well, what should he do,
He's just a lawyer.
Dave? What should he do?
Well, he should have done what he shouldn't have done, basically, back in October, which would... If Trump had walked in here in October, he'd have reduced NI, he'd have reduced all of these things and said, I want to get the country going on a growth footing. Our guy says, I want to get us going on a growth footing. Here are my 3 things I'm going to do. And everyone stands there going, that's the complete wrong thing to do, mate. And then he just goes, well, just believe in me, it'll be all right. It's nonsense. He had 16 leaders, he said. When he gave that pitch yesterday, he had 16 business leaders. They weren't business leaders. They're just Labour donors. I know some of the people that were sitting there. They don't have any exports to the USA, and they're not impacted by imports.
I don't know who was at that meeting.
Well, I know 1 or 2 that were there, and they don't have any dealings with the United States. So what was the point of them sitting there? And they're sitting there going, yes, we need to take a calm approach. It doesn't impact them. It makes no difference to them. They should have. And the JCB guy has just come out and said, I think we're taking the right approach. Yeah, because he's got a factory in America, which he's switching his manufacturing to. So they need to put people on these things that have got skin in the game. But to be brutally honest, Peter, we really are a pea in a Brussels world now, and we've got another Brussels running it. It's just a mess.
Dave, thanks for that. I appreciate your thoughts and your patience as well. That's Dave in London there. Give me a ring at 0344 499 1000. You can too. Jane says perhaps when Starmer leaves office, his legacy will be putting the world first and UK citizens last. Joanna in Salisbury on the abortion issue says, I don't agree with abortions, but it's such a huge decision made. I don't have the right to decide for anybody else. Beverly says, in regard to Fiona's call, that was about half an hour ago, we'll get that up on our social channels as well, I know, fairly soon as well. Fiona talking to us about her harrowing experience where she had a baby growing inside her up to 18 weeks, and very sadly the baby died, and she had to go to an abortion clinic to essentially have the baby removed from her system, and she was blocked by people who were saying, essentially accusing her of killing a baby, of having an abortion, and that was just something that was very, very traumatic for her, and still is. You could hear it in her voice, even though that was a while ago. And Beverly has been in touch and said, regarding Fiona's call, I had exactly the same experience about 34 years ago. It was because my baby had hydrocephalus, that's fluid on the brain, and would not have survived my giving birth at full term. I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I went through giving birth, knowing she wasn't going to survive. I wouldn't have needed moral judgment from religious people. Thanks for bringing this to the attention of people, says Beverly. And a nice word from Karen in Watford. I'm not going to read that out, Karen, but I do appreciate the sentiment that you have said, saying nice things about me. You can be a little bit self-indulgent in these things, and I don't want to be, because I want the focus to be on Fiona's call. And certainly if you haven't, if you didn't hear it at the time, you can go on socials, you can go to our different social channels, including on Twitter at talkTV. I'll retweet it from my own account as well, at Peter Cardwell, and you can maybe have a look at that at some stage as well. We're going to talk in just a second about dentists, because there will be no NHS dentists in future if urgent action isn't taken. That's according to MPs. And Mark Jones, who's the founder of Toothless in England, joins me again. He's had a chat with one of the health ministers. Is any progress being made? An incisive interview coming out next.
Just recently, the Chinese have retaliated. That's continuing the uncertainty. So the markets don't like it. Markets don't like uncertainty, and you have plenty of that from President Trump. That's one of the things I like about him. But unfortunately, the markets don't agree. And now with this threats of retaliatory tariffs, it's only making the market volatility increase. And by the way, it's a really bad idea, because countries with trade surpluses always lose in a trade war.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Linda, who's been in touch. She says, regarding abortion clinics, many offer full sexual health services, including menopause, colonoscopy, contraception, sexually transmitted infections, screening. These people coming within the exclusion zone can intimidate all these women. Thank you, Linda, for that. Mark says that Fiona did speak well, and whilst I am pro-life, I do agree that abortion has a part to play in a functional society. However, how many is enough before you start to raise an eyebrow? 300,000, 500,000? Abortion has become a standard choice and goes unchallenged. You're allowed to promote abortion, but not against. When do prospective fathers get a choice? It's a big debate, says Mark. So thank you for that. We've got, just on the tariffs, we've got a statement here from Downing Street that's just hot off the press. The Prime Minister apparently held separate calls with the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, and the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, today. Following this week's announcement, a spokesman says that the United States will impose increased tariffs on goods imported from foreign countries. The Prime Minister has been clear in the UK's response that it will be guided by the national interest and that we will calmly continue with our preparatory work rather than rush to retaliate. He discussed this approach with both leaders, acknowledging while the global economic landscape has shifted this week, it has been clear for a long time that like-minded countries must maintain strong relationships and dialogue to ensure our mutual security and maintain economic stability. They all agreed that an all-out trade war would be extremely damaging and is in nobody's interest, while agreeing to keep in close contact in the coming days. The Prime Minister will be holding further calls with international leaders this weekend. So that is what the PM has been up to. Billy has been in touch on Twitter. He says it's so disappointing to hear so many callers just parroting the there are just reciprocal tariffs line, when absolutely they are not. They're made up from import exports, and when that didn't suit them, they just charged a minimum 10% anyway, says Billy. And Andy in Hampshire says, Peter, anyone interested in trading knows the markets go up as well as down. If you're stupid enough to invest with someone who thinks the only way is up, you shouldn't be trading. US markets have been overtraded for a long time. It's a market correction. And your last caller, Dave from London, isn't speaking sense. He has invested in rubbish. He doesn't like it and has perhaps got poor investment advice, suggests Andy in Hampshire. I cannot speak for Dave's investments. And thank you to another David, not Dave who was just on, but another David, who is David 59379413995, presumably not his telephone number. Says, little lefty stand-in Pete hasn't a clue about Trump's tariffs. He make Petri Hoskin look intelligent. David, I suggest you ring Petri Hoskin and suggest those sentiments and see how far you get. Mark Jones is back with us. He is the founder of Toothless in England. And Mark, it's great to have you back on. You've been speaking, I think, to a government minister in the last few days. We said we'd have you back on, and now we know that MPs are warning there'll be no NHS dentists in future if urgent action isn't taken now. Just bring us up to date with that meeting and as much as you can tell us.
Well, I'm afraid to say, Peter, and thanks for having us back on, when we spoke the other week, I was looking forward to meeting with Minister Kinnock, Minister for Care. But just 24 hours before we were due to meet with him, he cancelled. However, there is good news that I can share with you. We're going to be meeting him at the end of the month on the 28th of April.
Okay, well, when that goes ahead, Mark, you tell us, in as much as you can say. Obviously, I'm sure there'll be some things you'll say privately, but when that goes ahead, you give the producers here a bit of a heads up and we'll get you back on. But for the meantime, Mark, we know that MPs are warning no NHS dentists in future if urgent action isn't taken. Are they finally getting the message, do you think?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Because this report, and yet another report into NHS dentistry and the dental crisis, this one coming from the Public Accounts Committee, really backs up what the National Audit Office found at the end of last year in their report, that really we are, as we see it, there is a massive gaping hole between what ministers promise, what governments, and we're talking about the previous government in this particular case, what governments promise and the ability to deliver on that promise from departments such as the NHS and the integrated care boards. There is absolutely no correlation whatsoever.
It's a very, very interesting report from the Public Accounts Committee. It says that efforts to fix the Ealing service have been a complete failure, and it found that fewer than 50 dentists out of a planned 240 took up the offer of a £20,000 bonus to move to a struggling area. Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, who's been in this programme a number of times, said almost unbelievably the government's initiatives appear to have actually worsened the picture. The time for tinkering at the edges is over. It's a time for big decisions. Mark, what should those big decisions be?
Well, the big decisions should be for a dental emergency. Simple as that. There are people, stories are abound, aren't they, Peter, of people with crumbling teeth, chronic pain, untreated infections. In fact, those are leading to dental sepsis and undiagnosed mouth cancers. And of course, this has consequences extend way beyond just those issues. Untreated as they are, the economy is hit, lost productivity, and in actual fact, school children are missing school because of mouth infections, dental infections. And it's just not good enough. We don't have access to NHS dentistry. It's on its knees. It's, as I've described previously, it's on its deathbed. And in, the last throes of, some emergency help needs to be given straight away. And the government of whatever colour, whatever flag, has got to get to grips with it. As you've just said, and MPs are realising now, it will be the end of NHS dentistry for good, and that just can't happen.
And how can you prevent it? Because so many students who are students of dentistry, they will see the glittering careers in private dentistry. They'll see the money. They'll see how that is an easier way of life and where they have more choice. Is there a way to turn the boat around at all?
Well, there is, and we said for this dental recovery plan at the time it was announced beginning of last year that it was not going far enough. What is needed is instead of that tinkering around the edges with contracts, that contract with dentists needs to be ripped up, put in the shredder, and radical reform needs to happen with injection of money. And in fact, the 80 odd million that was cited in the dental recovery plan was not new money. It wasn't additional money. It was money that was from the underspend, the colossal underspend over a number of years for NHS dentistry. And even that spend itself wasn't enough to cover, it only covered just under 50% of the population of England. Yeah. Now, we've got to get to grips with it. We've got to get mobile clinics out into rural and coastal communities. And I'm afraid to say at the Public Accounts Committee, as the chair heard from Chris Whitty, said, well, it's a no-go really for dental vans. And we see that as a lifeline for those communities that do not have access.
Maybe you can convince Stephen Kinnock when you talk to him later this month. Let us know how you get on with that. Mark, good to talk to you again. Mark Jones there, founder of Toothless in England, and talking about NHS dentistry there, wanting an NHS dentist for everyone. What are your experiences of this? 0344 499 1000. Let's just lighten the mood a little bit. It's been such a beautiful day outside here in London. I know in many parts of the UK it has as well. Many people looking forward to the summer, and I know that the Oasis concerts are happening at Wembley this summer, and now you can find out how you could be in a chance of winning those very elusive tickets to Oasis.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Well, lots of people have been in touch today about the free speech issue around protests outside abortion clinics. Now, this is a particular story about a woman who today has been found guilty by a court that she, well, ordered anyway, to pay a fine for breaching an exclusion zone about 150 metres outside an abortion clinic. It's raised all sorts of issues about free speech, about the right to protest, and also about medical privacy. We've had lots of people in touch on all sorts of media, all sorts of different ways, putting their opinions forward on free speech and abortion. And now I want to hear one from Nick in London, who has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Nick, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Evening to you. Free speech, of course, is marvellous and sacrosanct, but that doesn't mean because I have the right to free speech, I should always exercise my right to free speech. You know, there are times when common courtesy and common sense should tell me, don't say that here, don't exercise your right to free speech here. It's not only rude, discourteous, but also dangerous to other people. And that's like any right. I've got a right to do something, but that's not the same as imposing on other people's rights by my using it.
There will be people, Nick, who might listen to that and say, well, do you know what? Abortion, for example, is I've got a message here from someone on Twitter, Islandman1960, saying killing babies isn't right. I mean, that may well be his thought, but it's much more complicated than that, I would argue. Not everybody would. And there are people I know, there are people, I'm pretty close to in my life who are, absolutely against abortion in all circumstances. There are people who say, for example, if it's, there are some people who have different views on rape or incest, for example, they will say things like, it's not the baby's fault. Why should the baby suffer as a result? The point is that there will be some people, Nick, who will say, this is their number one issue. This is so important that actually even being, paying that fine, going to court today, making their point in a way that some might find intimidatory is an exercise of free speech and is so important that even if people are offended, it should go ahead. What do you think of that, Nick?
I think if you've got an issue with that, and that is a perfectly valid point, but the people to protest to are the authorities, the MPs, the healthcare people who actually put in the procedures, make it legal to get an abortion. Those are the people you should demonstrate against, and to, not to people using the service, which at the time they are using it is perfectly legal. If you want to change the law, then go after the lawmakers, not after people following the law. And I see the point. You've got to right to demonstrate, to campaign for a law change, but do it against the right people, not against the wrong ones.
Thank you, Nick. Some really interesting thoughts there. If you want to add to Nick's thoughts and the thoughts of many other people, Fiona as well, who was on about an hour ago, he made a really, really interesting and quite emotive discussion about her own experience, which is on our social channels now if you want to listen to it or watch it. It's on my Twitter as well. I've retweeted it at Peter Cardwell. Lots to discuss on this, and if you want to add your voice to it between now and 7, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Bridget's been in touch about freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. She says, why is it okay for the hate marches to be carried out week after week and our Jewish community terrified? Ilma says, China is a booming economy. Nothing wrong with Trump wanting to trade with another successful country. Rex says, Rex in the United States here, I hear all this talk about protectionism as if it were a bad thing. Isn't that what's taking place by all these countries hitting us with the high tariffs? Then they get upset because we're tired of paying to support the economies of everyone else. Rex, thank you for that. Good to hear from you in the United States as well. Now, I don't know if you've noticed this. There's this sort of weird thing in the sky. It's like a big orange ball and there's some sort of heat coming off it. I think it's called the sun. Previously I thought that was just the name of a big newspaper. Jo Wheeler is a meteorologist at Square Raindrop. We're going to ask her all about this and find out why she has 12 vacuum cleaners. That's coming in a minute. Stay tuned for that. Jo, what is going on? It's nice and sunny here in London anyway. What's the picture right across the country? Hottest day of the year so far, is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Not confirmed yet, but I think today we got to 22 degrees Celsius. That's 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas at this time of year, we're looking at a high of around 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. So really very warm for the time of year. Now, not a great surprise to us meteorologists, of course. We knew this was going to happen or something was going to happen because we underwent something called sudden stratospheric warming a couple of weeks back. Now, you may remember that phrase back from 2018. It was what brought us the beast from the east. And what happens really is up in the stratosphere, we see a rapid warming system which weakens the winds, sometimes even reverses them. They're usually west to east. If they start going the other way around, they start going east to west. And that then starts affecting the weather in the troposphere. It usually results in what we call a blocking high. Now, a blocking high, as opposed to any other high pressure, is the fact that it sits around for far longer. So you obviously haven't been out that often recently, Peter, because the weather's been glorious for quite a few days now.
I try to stay inside as much as possible, shield myself from the sun's rays, so I retain my youthful vigour.
Yeah, but I mean, the weather has been absolutely fantastic. Now, the original position of the high, bearing in mind that winds go clockwise around a high pressure system, we're bringing in a southeasterly, which, coming off the near continent, was actually quite warm. Then the high kind of built to the west of the UK, which again, if we see those winds going clockwise, started bringing in a northerly, which is pretty chilly. And at the moment, we've now got an easterly. So although it's actually quite warm, there are parts of the country, a little bit like where I live, where it's still a little chilly because of that wind. And that high pressure is set to stay with us. I can't see any significant change until the middle of the month. And even then, that might not happen.
Well, that's something to look forward to. That's we're going to have a sustained period where things are kind of lovely.
Yeah, we are still seeing some overnight frost though, so any gardeners out there like me, you'll be running in and out with your seed trays, trying not to kill them off, because we want the frost to go away.
Jo, I love talking about the weather with you and everything else. You often come on my weekend shows and talk about all the news. You're a commentator on all sorts of things, as well as the weather. Where you're a meteorologist at Square Raindrop. But I suppose the main question I have today is why do you have 12 vacuum cleaners?
I've just got a passion for vacuum cleaners. I have to physically restrain myself from going in the cupboard and checking all the block points and making sure they're very clean and the filters are okay.
So they're all in use. They're all, you use them in different ways.
Oh, no. My floors are in a shocking state. Please don't think they're nice and clean or anything like that. People who come into the house and say, "Shall I take my shoes off?" and I'm going, "Please don't. You could end up in A&E." No, I like to have working vacuum cleaners, and I have different ones for different places. I mean, I have a Karcher, which is amazing. You can pretty much hoover up small children. And certainly when the children were small, I used to hoover up all the Lego, tip it out, and then sort it out afterwards. And then there's one that I really don't like, which is unusual for me. I've even contemplated selling it, but, you know, it breaks my heart to let a vacuum cleaner go.
Clearly.
Yeah, it does. And do you know something? Like, the high point of my life is when I think I'm going to buy a new vacuum cleaner and then spend ages.
Where does this stem from?
I don't know. I have to say, it's not just vacuum cleaners. You know, you can add cars to that, dishwashers, any kind of...
How many cars and how many dishwashers do you have?
I only have I think the one of each now. I did have 2 washing machines, but that was by accident. You can't just store them around. But fundamentally, if they go wrong, yeah, then I like to be able to fix them. And of course, now that things are all electronic and modular systems engineering, it's just like, well, you know, I can't do that anymore.
Does anyone ever in your family ever object to all you having all these vacuum cleaners? Do you just say to them, look, just suck it up?
I see what you did there. No, but the children occasionally, if they've got a vacuum cleaner, they hide it from me, so I can't see it.
Joe, every time I talk to you or about you, I learn something new. And thank you for your commentary, not only on the weather, but also on vacuum cleaners. That's Joe Wheeler there, who's a meteorologist with Square Raindrop and never, ever dull, unlike the vast majority of weather forecasters. Stay with us here on Talk. We're going to talk to Joe Twyman in a minute because there's new polling out. He's the king of polls because 5 years after becoming Labour leader, the majority of British people say they're unclear what Keir Starmer actually stands for. Are you clear? Let me know. 0344 499 1000.
Just recently, the Chinese have retaliated. That's continuing the uncertainty. So the markets don't like it. Markets don't like uncertainty, and you have plenty of that from President Trump. That's one of the things I like about him. But unfortunately, the markets don't agree. And now with this threats of retaliatory tariffs, it's only making the market volatility increase. And by the way, it's a really bad idea because countries with trade surpluses always lose in a trade war.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's been 5 years since Keir Starmer has become leader of the Labour Party. That was a big change for that party, changing what happened, obviously, under Jeremy Corbyn, refashioning the Labour Party in his own image in many respects. But the majority of people in this country say they are still unclear what Keir Starmer actually stands for. A third of them say they know, 60% say they're uncertain. 43%, according to a YouGov poll, say that Starmer has changed the Labour Party for the worse, compared to 17% who say they have changed it, that Keir Starmer has changed it for the better. And interestingly, on Jeremy Corbyn, his predecessor, 38% of people, about 2 in 5, think Starmer has moved the party too far from the policies and values of Jeremy Corbyn. Very, very interesting one. Joe Twyman is the co-founder and director of Delta Poll and is with me now. Joe, very, very interesting polling here. Why is it, do you think, that people don't really know what Keir Starmer stands for? He is the Prime Minister. He's been the Prime Minister now for a number of months. It's not as if people don't know who he is. It's not as if though people haven't heard from him. We hear a lot of the time with these political leaders, oh, they're doing a relaunch or they're telling their story. I mean, everybody knows his father's a toolmaker. Everybody knows he's been a lawyer. I'd be surprised if there anybody who has any interest in politics who don't know those different aspects of his character, yet they still don't know what he actually stands for. What does that say?
Well, it's interesting you should ask about that. You say anyone with an interest in politics would know that, but lots of people don't have an interest in politics. Yeah, true. 50% of the average person in the street and the 50% of people less engaged than the average person in the street isn't paying too much attention to politics at all. We saw with successive prime ministers that people would struggle to name them, let alone recognise them if they pass them in the street. And that's the prime minister. When you go to leaders of other parties or less senior government positions, you find that actually this is the domain of very much the minority rather than most people. So it doesn't surprise me that people don't know what he stands for, because generally speaking, that is an accusation, if you that is thrown at lots of political figures. The same was true for Tony Blair. Even after a decade, people were saying they didn't know what he stood for. And it's not necessarily a good thing if people do know what you stand for. You can be well known for your beliefs, and people may simply not like them. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing. But obviously, what all this polling is reflecting is the fact that Keir Starmer is not as popular as he once was, and so regardless of which question you ask, essentially that's what you're measuring. Yeah, it's interesting. Tony Blair wrote in his autobiography, which is called A Journey, which I read the extracts but wouldn't buy it because well, he did say the profits for it would go to injured servicemen and women, but I mean, my clear view is that he should be in The Hague. And he said that the hardest thing for any practicing politician to accept, I suppose, to remember, is that most people, most days of the week, don't give politics a second thought. And that is true. It's a really interesting one when you drill down a little bit, because in June 2024, just before the election, 42% of people said they had a clear idea or a broad idea of what Keir Starmer stands for. Now only 33% do. So has he changed? Have they changed? Are they less engaged because there's an election next month? What's going on there? Well, it's a combination of two things, but probably the most important thing is that there isn't a general election, and so most people simply aren't paying attention to paying attention to politics because they don't see any incentive to pay attention to politics. There isn't an election coming. People aren't going to need to vote based on that. Yes, if you're in the areas that are holding local elections, then that's slightly different, and you may be paying attention to individual candidates there. But regularly, only around a third of people vote in local elections. So it is a very different situation. And if I were in number 10 and a strategist, I wouldn't be too concerned by these figures. It may be 5 years since Keir Starmer took over from Jeremy Corbyn, but at the same time, it's around about 4 years, we assume, until a general election needs to take place. So plenty of time to change. As a former Labour leader said, a week is a long time in politics, and there are many weeks remaining. That's right. And actually, when you look at some of the polling at the moment, what is the general picture? Because the Conservatives seem to be doing a little bit better in some of the polls. It's hard to say. And actually, the margin of error, of course, is quite small between them and Reform UK and Labour, actually, as well. There's not a lot in it, is there? Yes, you're right, Peter. We've talked many times about how the most important thing to look at is not an individual poll, but the trends that we're seeing. And the trend that we saw up until the end of last year, really, was one of decline for the Labour Party since the election victory, a rise for reform, and really not much movement at all for the Conservatives. And that situation has pretty much continued now for the last couple of months. We have what is, in effect, a three-way tie between the Conservatives, Labour and Reform UK. Some polls have one ahead, some polls have others ahead, but most of the fluctuations are short-term and within the margin of error. Certainly there's no long-term trend for anyone to pull ahead and establish anything like a sort of healthy lead. It will be interesting to see whether that situation continues in the run-up to the local elections, as I say, but certainly not much movement as yet. And it'll be interesting in the local elections, of course, because a lot of those polls that you're talking about
are nationwide polls, but of course the elections, the local elections, aren't in every area of the country, and also people often vote for they know their local councillor, or their local councillor's done something for them, or they vote for the Residents Association, for example, which is another big outfit, that a big essentially political party that only operates on the local level, for example. I mean, what are the figures, in as much as we know them, for the sort of four main parties when it comes to the local elections, or has that not been drilled down to such an extent just yet?
That hasn't been drilled down to yet. That's a very difficult thing to model, because, as you say, it's not everywhere. It's only a select area, and that select area is very different often from the national picture. But what you can tell is how things have changed since the last time those seats were up for grabs. The Conservatives did very well last time. Reform UK didn't really even feature at all, and so it will be interesting to see if they can hold on, and the degree to which Reform is able to turn the kind of national performance that we're seeing in the polls to a result at the ballot box, and whether they're able to get the kind of ground game that's required for local elections really up and running in time. It's the Lib Dems who historically have been very good at that, and they have seen a rise in the polls, admittedly not to the same degree as the other parties. So maybe they will be the ones to look out for at the local elections, but still some time until May to go until then.
It's an interesting, I just want to ask you two more things, one about the Conservatives, one about Labour. The Conservatives, of course, were not really looking at those local elections, we're not really looking at that in respect of the change since the general election. That's part of it. But actually, the last time these councillors were elected was at the very high point of Boris mania, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right, and so they can expect things to go down considerably from there. But the weird thing about the local elections is that essentially it's all about spin and the stories that come out of it, and inevitably all of the major parties will be able to point to something in the local elections and spin it as a success.
And Labour actually may not do that badly necessarily, because you got just over 1,000 seats, and in theory you could have four parties doing roughly the same.
Yes, that's right. You have over 1,000 councillors up for election, and of course we know that Reform UK struggled with their vetting and their selection process for candidates at the general election, and that was just a maximum 650 candidates. So it'll be interesting to see the degree to which they're able to get their ducks in order for that. Not that I'm suggesting they're running ducks, but Labour may do better than perhaps some people expect because of their relatively poor performance last time, and the Conservatives could be in for a very bad night. But as I say, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Conservative shadow minister on the airwaves the following day talking about how little Dunny on the Wold moving to no overall control was an indication that Kemi Badenoch was the right person to lead the Conservatives at the next election.
Joe, we'll let you go. I know you've got some very important polling to do up your sleeve. Joe is co-founder and director of Delta Poll. Thank you for him. Just time to swiftly, just for a couple of minutes, talk to Mark in Lincolnshire. Last call of the day. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hiya.
Just two really quick points. Firstly, A&E does work sometimes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I was seen within 45 minutes today, which was really
You were in A&E today, Mark?
I was, yes.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. My balance had got out of hand today, to the point, kind of created a bit of a panic attack. So
I'm very sorry to hear that, Mark, but you were seen quickly and you've been treated well?
Yeah, the ambulance turned up about 40 minutes or so. Funny enough, at the exact same time, my shopping for the day turned up as well.
Never rains but it pours, eh?
Tell me about it. But he was really great. He came in and put everything away for me, which was wonderful.
Oh, that's very kind. Yeah, that's very kind. Yeah, that's good.
Well, I've already rang them back and thanked him.
Good.
Thanked his manager. Other than that, and he was absolutely great. Saw a doctor, was examined by a doctor within 45 minutes of going into A&E today.
That's very good. That's very good, Mark.
Well, fantastic. Well, I was in and out within 2.5 hours, Peter.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm glad, Mark, that you had a good experience at A&E, and I wish you continued good health, and certainly that is something that a lot of people really want from the NHS, of course. Kevin O'Sullivan is here between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then between 9 and 10 with What Just Happened. What's coming up in your show, Kev?
We're going to obviously have a look at
two tiers 5th anniversary as the Labour leader, he posted the most extraordinary tweet, sort of boasting about everything that Labour was doing, which was like a reverse barometer of everything they're not doing. You know, securing our borders, making us richer, improving the NHS. It was like everything that they're not actually doing. It's hilarious. Later on,